I'll see.
This program was recorded on Monday, August the 19th, in the year of our Lord 2019. The opinions expressed by the participants in the following program do not necessarily represent that of this station or its management.
Or anybody else.
His management.
From the John DeVita recording studio, located in an undisclosed and clandestine location on the great northwest side of our fair city of Chicago, we once again are pleased to be presenting yet another edition of our monthly roundtable panel discussion show, Meet the Chicago Historians. Now here's the guy who started it all, John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Rich Lang, from the John DeVita Broadcast Center. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, August the 19th, the year 2019. Today, the panel will be talking about whatever comes across their minds. So sit back and enjoy Meet the Chicago Historians.
Yes, or dangerous.
And now to start today's broadcast, here is our announcer, Mr. Richard Lane.
And now, here's our panel moderator, John S. Kuchelko.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, John. And welcome to our August edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. We're glad to be here with you. It's a beautiful day today in Chicago and the Chicago suburbs. Well, maybe a middling beautiful day, but it's not raining and it's not 95 degrees outside. So it's a beautiful day out there. We're here at the John DeVita Broadcast Center. We always remind you folks, don't try to find us. You'd have to go through far too many checkpoints, the barbed wire entanglements, the minefields, and then you level after level to get down to this subterranean bunker where we're established.
Oh, don't forget the guard dogs.
Oh, God. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
We actually do have a guard dog.
There's photos sensitive. We've got a guard dog right here in the studio, and we're down about 19 levels from ground level.
And all the passwords you have to know?
Oh, you have to go through these, eye identifications, the iris identification, fingerprints, check. It's just too much of a hassle. But we're glad to have you with us today, folks, on this August. We're still in the height of summer, and I thought we would begin now by going around the table and let the members of our panel introduce themselves. And I'll start with one of the longest-serving members of our panel, to my right, the pride of the Chicago Fire Department.
What do you mean the longest?
Longest serving.
Oh, okay.
Longest serving.
Just so you don't say the oldest.
No, I didn't. I scrupulous. I said the longest serving member of our panel.
He is the oldest.
And that's me, Bill Kugelman, with all those years in the Chicago Fire Department, now with the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago. And let me say that we are at 5218 Southwestern, and we will be having an open house here the 24th of August, which is this coming Saturday from 10 to 2. That's at 5218 Southwestern. We never had a fire museum in Chicago. We always celebrated burning down the town, and I guess they just forgot about having a museum. So we do have a museum now, thanks to the building given to us lent to us by Alderman Ed Burke, and we thank him very much. I am one of the oldest ones here, I guess, the longest serving, and it's been a pleasure. John has done one hell of a job, and with the Cop Talk show, and now with these historians, which we're all pleased. I am very pleased to be with. So to my right now is another member, and he will now introduce himself.
Excuse me. Tom McKenna, retired Chicago Police. I was in a unit that you did not want to see me when I was working. I was an investigator with major accident investigation. So you saw me when you were dead or wished you were. I'm a lifelong friend of our normal moderator, John Ryan. John's a bit under the weather. I spoke with him yesterday. He's in good spirits, and hopefully he'll be able to join us in the near future. But if you are going to pray, and I am a firm believer in prayer, you may want to enter John Ryan's name in your prayers. And to my right,
Don Peter from Oak Park, Illinois. I'm also a member of the Fire Museum of Greater Chicago and proud of it. And I live in Oak Park and sort of proud of it. And
Sort of proud of it.
sort of proud of it. As I call it, Camelot, because everything goes right there.
Da, 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 da.
And that's about it.
And now we've heard from. I just want to interject. We have the Cicero Fire Department, the Chicago. Forgive me. This is a Freudian slip because I'm from the Chicago Fire Department, and the Chicago Police Department represented. And Don's one of the newest members of our panel. He just joined us not so long ago. And now our sterling announcer.
Well, thank you, John. Yeah, I'm your announcer, Richard Lang. I've got a background in teaching modern American and European history. I've come to enjoy Chicago history, and part of my desire to escape in the past and wax nostalgic, I'm involved in a group that recreates old-time radio shows.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you, panel. Thank you for being here today. My name is John Escachoco. I'm your host. I was in public service, politics, government, whatever you wish to call it, for most of my life. I was a town trustee, town assessor, state representative, Plan Commission chairman, had various other titles, and I love history, and I'm a history major and have a degree from DePaul University, bachelor's and master's.
go Blue Demons.
The Blue Demons. Yeah, my alma mater, the DePaul University, which was a great institution when I attended. Had a great history department, great history professors that inspired a love of history. Sadly, a number of them have now departed from this earth, but they were great professors.
John, did you say that you were from Cicero? Tell the people.
I am from Cicero. I am from Cicero. If anyone missed that part, I am from the great town of Cicero, which was founded in the year 1857, which is more than 150 years old, and has a storied history. Well, the county assessment in the state of Illinois is generally done at the township level. If you go through most of the counties of the state of Illinois, property assessment, the actual assessment, is done by your local township assessor. But as in most things, the county of Cook is different. And if you ever look through the statute books, the Illinois Revised Statutes, they're all examples of things where it says, except counties with a population in excess of 500,000, or except in municipalities with a population in excess of 500,000. And I think even still today, Cook County and Chicago are the only ones that meet that qualification. So in Cook County, the assessment is done at the county level. The county assessor does the actual assessment, but we still continue to have township assessors in each of the 30 suburban townships in Cook County, they're sort of branch offices of the county assessor's office. And we assist people with their tax problems. We maintain up-to-date tax records, and we help them with filing their claims for exemptions and property relief and so forth. So in Cook County, the county assessor handles what is done at the township level most every place else. And as Tom mentioned, our great host, John Jack Red Ryan, I had a chance to speak to him a little over a week ago, and as Tom said, he's in great spirits, and was our host for a long time, and we hope to see him back here at some point in the future. But he sends his best wishes to everybody, to all of his listeners, and if he has a chance to listen to this, all the best to you, Jack. We hope to see you back soon.
He said he might try to call in today.
Oh, that's great.
Very good.
That's great.
It would be
Come
nice.
in and phone in, please. John Charles, play on what John Charles Daly used to say on What's My Line. Well, we're here on the 19th day of August, and it's a little past the middle of the month of August, and we're coming up on Labor Day. August is it's a unique month in that there are no holidays in the month of August. It's one of the very few months on the calendar that has no holiday of any kind.
You got to change that.
Well, I suppose we could, but so there isn't a peg to hang this on. You know, in December you can talk about Christmas, in November you can talk about Thanksgiving, July, Independence Day, in April you can talk about Easter, but we don't have a holiday as a peg for today's get-together. I had one topic I wanted to start out with before we even go into the review of the news, and that is schools are already going back into session.
Many are.
I was at a function last Thursday in Cicero, and we had the superintendent of our J. Sterling Morton High School, and he told me that they had gone back into session, I think, on Monday. They had started on Monday the 12th of last week. That's before the middle of August they were back in session.
My grandkids started today.
And I see kids...
out in the Crystal Lake area.
And I happen to believe that that is un-American. And I forthrightly and without reservation say I think going back to school before the end of August and before Labor Day is un-American. I fondly remember my childhood when you went to school 2 days after Labor Day. They gave you one more day off after Labor Day. So Labor Day was on a Monday. You usually had that Tuesday off, I guess, to recuperate from watching Jerry Lewis the day before.
Oh, boy.
And then you went back to school on Wednesday. And I thought that's the way the good Lord intended school to begin. You were supposed to have June, July, and August off. That was why it was called summer vacation.
Most of us grew up with that.
Absolutely. And I think it is un-American to require kids to go back to school on August 12th. I've told people this often. I hate it when I walk into a store. I walked into Target, I think, the week before the 4th of July. It was like June 29th. And they were already putting up signs saying back to school. I mean, school had just ended a few weeks before, and they're already putting up advertising for back to school. And I remember how much I hated that as a kid.
And that's not as bad, John, as not seeing signs back to school, but they also start putting up Halloween decorations.
Oh God, yes.
Yes.
I was in a store a couple of days ago, and they were already putting up all the Halloween, the pumpkins, and all the.
And another couple of weeks they'll start putting up Christmas stuff.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's August. It's 90. It's been 90, 95 outside, and they're already. I understand that the stores they plan these holidays in advance, but again, it's an insult to American childhood to be putting up signs that say back to school before the 4th of July. It is outrageous, and somebody ought to do something about this.
Weren't they talking about once where you would go to school so many days and have 2 or 3 weeks off, and then it all during the summer?
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I've heard there may be districts that do that, but I mean, it supposedly goes back to the days when America was largely farm country, and kids had to be off June, July, and August to help their fathers run the farm.
Right.
And it was a great idea, and they should have maintained it. And
you could have kept the farms.
The school system, something unique to Chicago, the old Pullman Works, the railroad coaches that was out in the southeast side of Chicago. Their high school, it was a company town, and their high school called Pullman Tech. When the plant was open, the school was open. They never had a summer vacation. Yeah.
The one advantage to an early start, maybe more at the college level, would be that you could finish your quarter or semester before Christmas. And your Christmas vacation is a real break rather than just a matter of a week or two before final exams.
Right.
That's the one possible advantage.
I think when they went to the quarterly system, that was part of it. Because in the old days, when you were in grade school, the semesters didn't mean anything. But when you got into high school semesters and college semesters, the semester ended around the end of January.
Yeah.
So it didn't make any difference when you started. When they went to the quarterly system, you're right. They wanted to jam everything in so that you were off. You finished all your exams before December. I don't know that applies again to grade school because I don't think those divisions make any difference at that level.
I think we're going to have to bring that up with the teachers union. And yeah, you laugh about it, but I'm very serious. They want certain days and they would sooner work year round, to tell you the
I
truth.
thought the teachers wanted summer off so they could take another job. I mean, I thought
Well,
the teachers-
that's-
Get
that's
unemployment,
always-
get unemployment compensation.
It's always been the what they've done. You know, when I was running the racetrack police, I hired them during the summer,
Right.
and they were all very good. They appreciated it, but I still think that it's not them running things. It's the politicians running things,
Could have.
and they're going to have to get together and do something, because the kids, our kids, are failing.
Right.
They are failing in a lot of different areas.
There's some schools in the city of Chicago, that educational program, I think it was adopted under Bush, and I forget what it's called.
Common Core.
Yes.
Common Core.
Some schools, I was looking at statistics last year, and the goals are pretty minimal. And there were some schools that had pretty high enrollments, close to 1,000, that not one student in the entire school met those standards. I mean, that's
Yes.
pretty disgraceful.
Well, Common Core isn't that when the government dictated the courses that would be taught?
Well, the idea was that there was a good idea behind it, and that was that they wanted like a base level throughout the whole United States where kids would have, that certain things would have to be taught in math, in English, in literature, in science, in history, so that there would be some requirement that school districts measure up across the nation. So you wouldn't have districts with lax standards and strict
Right.
standards. But the argument against it, of course, is that whenever you put anything in the hands of the federal government, they screw it up. And the idea that everything should be run centrally from Washington is generally a bad idea.
When they screw it up, they do a good job, though.
But those are the people that should go back to school.
Yeah. yeah.
History,
Should.
or what we
Kids
were
don't learn
taught,
history today.
civics, is not even taught anymore.
I don't think
It's a
history is
shame.
either.
And now the governor
Very little.
has signed a law that they must teach. What is it?
Gay,
Oh, yes.
African American.
African American, gay, lesbian.
Gay,
Right. Concentrate on the important stuff.
Yeah.
Education
Yeah.
is becoming indoctrination, and kids
That's-
are being
that's
taught.
right.
They're being taught. They're being lectured and taught about climate change and about the political agenda of the left, but they're not learning American. If they learn, what they learn about American history is that it's all bad and that it was all racist.
There are some colleges and universities, they did a poll, please identify your political affiliation. And some colleges and universities with hundreds and hundreds of professors and teachers, no one identified as conservative. No one.
Right. And I would think, I'm not sure, but I think a lot of the teachers teaching now started in the 60s.
That's the problem.
They teach socialism, is what they're doing.
Well,
60s are the root of a lot of our problems.
socialism, in my opinion, is kind of a misnomer. It's mostly like Marxism. If you look at their
I like
based on
at one of, and this was in the last election, at one of Bernie's rallies, they interviewed four, well, they were students, but they were attending Bernie Sanders' rally. Three males and one female. And the announcer, I think it might have been from that Veritas group, their conservative group, and they kind of like expose liberal agendas. Anyway, they asked these four students, Bernie Sanders is a avowed socialist. Well, what is socialism? The three guys wouldn't even take a stab at it. But you'll love this. The girl said, "Oh, I believe in socialism. I think everyone should be sociable. That's why I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Being sociable is
That is interesting.
Yeah, she had no clue what socialism was.
Getting back to
And they're
their
not gonna learn
early
about it.
starts, would it be that they're building in snow days and all different kind of
Well, but
days
they've
to
had
cut.
that. They had that for a long time. That I mean, that doesn't justify starting back on August
No.
12th. My
I mean,
God, I mean,
I'm
it's-
showing my age, but when I was
No.
there, nobody ever heard of snow days or cold weather days.
No.
That's a good point when we were going to school. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's when I walked 25 miles a day to and
Now,
from.
wasn't there a time, maybe I missed it, that the state at least required an exam or some proficiency in civics? To
Yeah, it used to
Oh
be.
yeah, you had to,
Is that still
there was
true,
a requirement
perhaps?
that
Okay.
you had to learn the Constitution too.
Yeah.
At the grade
Political
school level.
structure, government
You had to
structure,
study
right,
the
right, right.
Constitution of the country and of the state of Illinois. I remember when I was in grade school, we spent time. We had booklets. We read the Constitution and the state Constitution. You had to take an exam on both. I'm not sure that is.
That's
still,
what's one of the problems with our education system today. They're too much with this iPad and this iPhone and all this stuff. And like you said, our students today, the Constitution, what is that? Who came up with that idea?
Yeah.
I mean, when we learn about history and about the civics and all that stuff is gone, as far as I'm concerned. And today, now this past Friday, the 16th, Ridgewood High School, which is a couple blocks north of me, right down the street here, they went in for orientation day, and today is their first full day of vacation. I mean, of a school. Now, what happens? And let's say my kid was going to there and I was going on vacation this week, because a lot of companies,
Right.
you go going to seniority. I know I had to take my vacation from Illinois Bell according to seniority. Now what happens
Yeah,
if
it's the same
this
thing on
would
the
have
police
been
department. You
Yeah.
bid for furloughs by seniority.
right, Tom? And I mean, so now I have to give up my vacation because my kid has to go back. And
That's
lo and
another thing,
behold, don't these kids miss? Because if they miss so many days, they got to do the year over again. And it's ridiculous. And I agree with John and with all you people. When I went to school, I went to Bell School at 3700 block of Oakley Avenue, kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. We always went back to school the second day after Labor Day. When I was taken out of Bell School and went to St. Andrews on Addison and Paulina, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth was the same thing. We started the second day after Labor Day.
Right.
And then when I went to St. Benedict's High School at Irving and Levitt, the same thing. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior was always the second day after Labor Day. Who in the heck came up with this idea? Oh, I know why they want to start early. Because they get out of school before Memorial Day. This is the answers I'm getting. The young lad that lives across the alley from me, who cuts my grass and helps me with different things around here. Well, he says they want to be out of school by Memorial Day.
Why is that a benefit?
I have no idea, John. Somebody got a brainstorm, and that's what's holding on to
The
it.
established idea once was that summer began with Memorial Day
That's
and
right.
ended with Labor
That's
Day.
right.
So
That's-
you went to school
that's right.
until just after Memorial Day and went
Right.
back just after Labor Day.
I remember the first 2 or 3 days after I went back to school, inevitably were the hottest days of the year.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
part of the
a-
issues now, more and more schools, perhaps not
Well, they
all,
have air
are
conditioning. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had windows.
Right.
But I agree with everybody. I always say that the school year begins after Labor Day and ends a couple of days after Memorial Day. Up
Well, at
in
least
West-
Chicago Public is holding that tradition. They may be about the only district left
Yeah.
doing that. Suburbs, I think, are going back earlier. and
Yeah,
earlier.
well, like I said, Ridgewood start their fourth day of classes today, 19th of August.
Yeah, I think most suburban schools, I think, are starting today.
Yeah.
And again, if you have a school that's not air conditioned and we get the heat spikes up and it's 100 degrees, which could very easily happen,
In September, right?
that's not going to be a very good learning environment
Yeah,
to be
do-
sitting
do-
and
do they
baking
have-
in a
Do
classroom.
they have heat days as opposed to snow days?
That's a question.
I mean,
Sure.
now you get two snowflakes. Hey, we got a snow day. We can't,
Well, I think we have a unanimous resolution here. We have resolved that it is un-American to go back to school before Labor Day. and that tradition
Un-American
darn well.
would be a bit strong. But I think they're on the right
I think we darn well somebody ought to do something.
What do those
about
damn Ruskies do, I wonder?
Well, I can not only agree with that, but I can top that because I remember when I was in school, I didn't want to go back at all.
it. No,
So
we could have started the day after New Year's
Yeah,
Day
that-
for
that's
all
right.
that.
Hey, Tom, isn't that when you got a real bad stomach ache and a real bad headache?
that's right. Yeah.
My
One thing
mother
they
and
have
father.
more and more now in school that we don't remember as kids, Teachers Marking Day, things like that, getting you out of school.
Oh, all of that. Oh, yeah. They have
Never
these
had much of
teachers conference days.
Right.
None of that.
You know, and that may be a reason for it because they get all these Mickey Mouse days off
That's when
that
they gotta-
benefit the teachers.
they
that are
gotta
for the
start
teachers'
earlier.
benefit,
That's a thought.
and they have to start earlier to make up for all those days that are.
Did
I know this
Did
because-
I not tell you that you got to
it
get
all-
the unions?
Yeah, it could well.
Teachers' unions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, Bill. That's probably why it hasn't happened in Chicago yet, because of the union contract.
I also want to apologize for slurring a great American Mickey Mouse. I don't mean to associate the great Disney character Mickey Mouse with these ridiculous holidays that I was referring to. So my apologies to a great American Mickey
Right.
Mouse.
And it all
Your
started.
Mickey Mouse courses. so
Right,
called.
and it all started in
Mouse.
Chicago.
Oh,
He used to
Mickey
live on the west side of
That's
Chicago.
right. That's right. He was an original Chicagoan.
Yeah, that's right.
Walt Disney.
Went to Crane Technical High School and King's School on Harrison, just west
Born
of
on
Western
Strip
Avenue.
Avenue. I think.
Walt Disney was born on Augusta Boulevard, somewhere around Worcester, between Worcester and Damon.
Ah,
I worked, when I was with the telephone company, I worked right next door to the house that Walt Disney was born
was
in.
it marked? Did they have a plaque? or
No,
something
but
on
the
it?
people next door told me
People
that's-
knew that it was
yeah,
where they-
yeah.
Probably had rats in it, though.
No, mice.
Oh,
Worth of being a museum.
Mice, and there could have been some ducks out in the backyard as well. Yeah.
And a
it was a
big
wisecrack if
goofy
I ever heard
dog.
one.
A dog named Goofy.
Okay. Well, I think we've established the desirability of restoring the traditional summer vacation of June, July, and August, and school should begin 2 days after Labor Day, which was the way the good Lord intended it.
Let's see what the kids think about this too.
Right.
I can't imagine. It'd be hard for me to imagine that any kid would enjoy going back to school in the middle of August. I can't conceive of that as a kid.
No.
It was bad enough when August came around and you knew that at the end of August you had to go back to school. I always said each day you felt like you were counting down toward the death
Right.
knell that was going to come. That was one reason I think why people dislike August, because you know that August leads to September and September means school.
That's right.
The days are already getting shorter.
But getting
Yeah.
back to the old days when they were, working on the farms, the farm areas, do they go back early?
I don't know.
don't know.
Maybe they continue to maintain.
Who's that? The
Farm states, maybe
Farm
out in
states.
Kansas,
No,
and
up in
my
Wisconsin.
ancestral home in Kansas. I'll have to look into that.
up in Wisconsin.
Nebraska.
The Mike, the kid that helps me up in Wisconsin, he was with me over the weekend helping me do some work, and he goes back to work after
There you
Labor
are.
Day.
There you are.
Yeah. Of course, to see up in our area, we've got the Walworth County Fair that starts this coming the Wednesday before the holiday. So these kids all get jobs working at the fairgrounds up there, and of course the fair ends at midnight on Labor Day. So these kids are all up there working at the fair, and of course it's getting now to the time where they start working on their crops. Getting, and so that's why they start their school year right after Labor Day, the second day after Labor Day.
3 cheers for
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Oh,
Upland
yeah.
County
Yeah.
Fair signaled the end of summer.
Yeah.
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 You know,
So,
since the
uh,
movie Picnic. things
Yeah.
like that.
The kid that lives across the alley from me here, Bobby. Thursday I was sitting upstairs and I sent him a text message and I put on there, ho, 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 and back to school you go, because you had to go back Friday for orientation. So he sends me a text message back, John, I thought you were my friend. Don't remind me of it.
Right.
So, but no, I agree. And the same thing up in Wisconsin. Up in our area, we have outdoor mass in the grass. And we start Memorial Day, the first Sunday of the Memorial Day weekend, and we end with the Sunday at just before Labor Day. And then it seems like it just kind of all starts to go downhill then after that. So
Right now, it's time for our first brief intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historian.
Hey, John.
Tom Chicago.
well, friends, it's not that far away, and of course we're talking about that here on this program. It's not that far away that we're going to start seeing some inclement weather. Oh yeah, this is August, and today is going to be a very warm, humid day. But it's just a few months away, and we're going to be seeing a little white stuff coming out of the sky called snow. And today, and in the next few months, it'd be your intelligence to take a look at your roof, siding, and gutters and make sure they are in good shape. Because once that snow and hail and sleet and all that comes, you don't want drip on your ceilings in your rooms, or mold or mildew in your crawl space. And have it checked by a professional. Give Mike Besch Brothers Roofing and Siding, a call, and Mike will come out in a shiny red truck with ladders on top, and he'll take a look at your roof, siding, and gutters and give you an estimate and go from there. Mike has been in the business for many years, and he's a very good roofer. So call Besch Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. That's Besch Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, area code 630-616-1359. Remember, that bad weather is not that far away, even though today is August, and we're going to have a nice warm next couple days, but within the next couple months, oh boy. And you don't want to have trouble with your ceilings, drip on your ceilings, or mold in your crawl space or attic, and you don't want your walls damaged by a leaky gutter. So give Besch Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters a call, area code 630-616-1359. Mike Besch will take a ride over in his nice, shiny red truck with ladders on top, give you an estimate, and go from there. That's Besch Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters, area code 630-616-1359. Call today for a free estimate.
Now back to today's edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. John?
Thank you, Rich. So we're here once again with our August edition of Meet the Chicago Historians, and the dog days of summer, as they say. This is the time of year when the dog star Sirius is prominent in the sky, and that's the origin of the term, the dog days of summer. We have our own dog with us, keeping guard over our deeply underground headquarters here today. Well, we kicked off the gathering today with a discussion of the un-American nature of going back to school before Labor Day. It is un-American, and somebody ought to do something about it. But customarily, we kick off our monthly voyage into broadcast success with a look at the news of the day, the week, the month gone by. We're here once a month. So this is the point in our gathering, 30 minutes after the fact, when we're going to take a look at the news. And I know Tom said that he had a topic that he wanted to raise in terms of the news of the day.
But last week, our esteemed senator from California, Kamala Harris, she was giving a speech, I believe, to a predominantly African-American audience. And she brought up the incident in Ferguson, Missouri, about Michael Brown and how his disgrace that a black man was shot down, and I think she might have used the term murdered by a white police officer. for her to bring this up now, either she's ignorant of the facts, which I doubt she is, or she just did this to fan the flames of the racial divide, because Michael Brown, well, first of all, the story that was reported by the media about the incident, they did not get one single thing correct. Zero. The only thing that was correct about the story that they reported is that the police officer from Ferguson and Michael Brown were in the same place at the same time. Other than that, every single thing that they reported about that incident was wrong. They said he was coming from his grandmother's house. He was coming from robbing a convenience store and assaulting the owner. They said that he was confronted by the police. He confronted the police. Now, for a African American senator to bring this up, Obama was president, Eric Holder was Attorney General, black. They did the investigation, and believe me when I tell you this, if they could have come up with one single thing to charge this officer with, they would have. I mean, they would have stretched it. And the reason he wasn't charged is because he did absolutely nothing wrong. And President Obama, in his 8 years in office, never sent a representative to a police officer's funeral killed in the line of duty. But Michael Brown, who was, for lack of a better word, a worthless thug, the White House sent representatives to that worthless thug's funeral. And the witnesses, you know, again, when it was first reported, I have to tell you, they had me. I thought that the officer, I mean, geez, here's a guy that's got his hands up and says, hands up, don't shoot, and this officer shoots and kills him. Well, the reason because that's not what happened. And the witnesses, who were black, stated during the investigation that that isn't what happened. But it got all the way around as that being the story. There were, hands up, don't shoot was the mantra for some of these groups. So anyway, to get back to the original point, for a United States Senator to tell a story like that she either knew was false or she's just plain stupid. When it got out, other media outlets, liberal media outlets, I think the Washington Post gave it 4 Pinocchios for lies. When it got out that it was an absolute lie what she said, her response was, well, that doesn't make any difference because it's about a black man it's about a black man confronting a police officer, assaulting the police officer, and the police officer justifiably shooting and killing him. And, I know this is really not politically correct to say this about another human being, but as far as Michael Brown goes, good riddance. Good riddance.
Churchill once said that a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth has even gotten out of bed.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, now, in the original incident, before the investigation was concluded, there was some doubt as to did he, didn't he? After the investigation was concluded, it did not happen that way. And for a presidential candidate to bring this up, to show racism it's disturbing. I mean, it really is.
Does she have to go that far back to an older case to bring up something that she might have thought was overtly racist or claimed
right.
so? No.
These statistics done about police shootings in black on white shootings, Harvard did a study, not a bastion of conservatism. Harvard did a study and said that is just flat out not true. But these candidates and these black spokesmen, quote unquote, tell these stories like they are true, and it's disgraceful.
All I can say is, fasten your seatbelts because it's only going to get worse. I mean, we're
Right.
early. This is August of the year before the presidential election. You've got all of 2020 up until the first week of November, and it is going to get much worse. We have a phone call. we have our, excuse me, Tom, but we have our
Oh, great.
regular host, Jack Red Ryan, on the
Right.
line. Jack, are you with us?
No, doctor.
Hey,
Hello, Jack.
hey, John, how you doing?
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Jack. That's what you don't want to say that in an airport terminal. How you doing, Jack?
Well, you're not super great.
Are you still there, Jack?
Yes, he's there.
We're glad to have you with us, Jack. I understand you're at home. You're at home now.
Yes.
I imagine you're glad to be back in the friendly confines of your own home.
No. I was in captivity for 8 months.
8 months. Good Lord.
In captivity.
Yeah, somebody finally came up with your bond money.
You can hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Tom told us a little bit about you. He mentioned that he's a close friend of yours, and he's one of the few that's willing to admit it.
Yes.
That's right. I'm proud of it.
Well, I can't. Not yet.
So how are you coming along? We hope one day we can have you back here in your host's chair.
Oh.
Well, he sure hopes so. He'd like back to
Is there anything you wanted to? Is there any topic you wanted to talk about today, Jack?
No, except the radio show.
Come to the right place.
I sure miss you guys.
Yeah, we miss you too.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Me too.
we miss you and we wish you all the best.
Send me back.
Hey, you called right at the right time. I was talking about your favorite president, Barack Obama.
Take care of, you know.
talk about the president.
Yeah, John,
Who all you got there today?
me, Tom McKenna, Bill, John, Don, and Rich.
We got a full panel today, except for you.
Yeah.
Your chair is waiting
That's
for
good.
you.
We were just talking about the news. We spent 30 minutes talking about it's un-American for kids to go back to school before Labor Day. That was our
About
first.
much for a week, but I don't recommend this as a method.
See you again, Jack.
Okay, say goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, thanks for calling, Jack.
Bye-bye. Godspeed.
Thanks a lot. God be with you.
Thank you.
And that was Jack Red Ryan, our long-standing host and moderator, who's been under the weather now for a little less than a year, and we wish him the best. He's back home now, and we hope that will be the change of location will bring a change in his health prospects as well.
And what was mentioned before, why Jack could use prayers.
That's right.
For sure.
Use a lot of prayers. He's a great guy.
Very good guy.
Okay, well, getting back on track here and talking about these politicians, especially black politicians, talking about racism, I have a question, and the answer is the same from everybody that I talked to. Before Donald Trump declared his candidacy for president, Donald Trump was in the news, for sake of argument, let's say 30 years.
Sure.
30. Let's just say.
Everyone knew
let's
Donald
use-
Trump's name.
Sure. He had one of the most popular television shows called The Apprentice. Was he ever, prior to declaring his candidacy, ever referred to as a racist?
No, not to my knowledge.
No. That's the same answer everybody gives. No, he wasn't.
In fact, I understand he was noted for, he had a lot of employees giving
there's
good positions to people of various
There's
ethnicities.
there's photographs of him being hugged by Al Sharpton.
Yeah.
And being at fundraisers for the NAACP. So
It seemed. Go ahead.
it's really a disgrace to call someone. I'll give you another example, and I think we talked about this before on the show, and I think, John, you said you knew him, was Bernie Epton.
Oh, I knew Bernie Epton. Yeah, great guy too.
Before Bernie Epton became famous for running as a Republican against. It was the primary, right?
Harold Washington. He was the nominee against Harold Washington.
He was known as a liberal Jew from Hyde Park.
He was a very liberal Republican. He was looked upon as a
But now-
nice guy,
then-
one of the nicest
then-
guys I knew in
then
Springfield.
All of a sudden, overnight, because he's running against an African American, they called him a racist. I mean, it's a great trump card, excuse the pun.
Right.
But there's nothing in when you talk to people about why. Tell me specifically why Donald Trump is a racist. They can't put their finger on it.
Well, the answer, and part of the answer to this is it's all they have. It's all the left has is to smear anyone who disagrees with them is now accused of being a racist.
And
Because they don't have anything else they can use against Trump.
Well, this word racist seems to be, and racism seems to be the front page word now on TV, radio, and everybody. And everybody is really now laughing at it.
Right.
What the heck is
Losing
racism?
its meaning.
Everybody's
And the
racist.
And the thing is, John, I know you debated, and one of the classic debate tactics is when you lose the argument, attack the man.
Oh, sure.
They completely lost the argument, so now they're attacking Trump personally.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders starts off his rallies with, he's a racist, he's a homophobe, he's personally attacking him.
That's what Hillary used. Remember, Islamophobe, homophobe, hereophobe, thereophobe, everywhere a phobe.
Well, every so often they try to bring up, and I think without any real proof, that Donald Trump and his father in the real estate running were somewhat discriminatory toward black. You hear this?
Right. A lawsuit was filed.
Yeah.
But anybody that's
more
ever
than one.
owned any kind of property knows you're going to get lawsuits.
Sure.
Just because somebody files a lawsuit and says something doesn't mean. And another thing, a lot of people don't understand a lot about business. They point to Donald Trump's bankruptcies. Sometimes in business, that is a
tactic.
That's
a
true.
tactic.
That is true.
And
They're looking for anything negative.
yeah,
Absolutely.
About
negative.
70 years ago, old Joe McCarthy was accused of calling anyone who disagreed with him a communist. Remember how we were taught that
Yep.
this was terrible because he was ruining careers, calling everybody who opposed him a communist. Well, how does that differ from what the left is doing today? Anybody who disagrees with them is a racist.
The only difference is the words.
well, I said this before. I forget if I said it on the air, but I'm going to say it again. If the economy stays the way it is, and that's another thing. They're talking about this recession that hasn't happened.
And it may happen sometime before
Yeah.
2050.
Yeah, right.
Sometime between now and 2050, we're going to have a recession.
Yeah, I am stating that if the economy stays the same and there's no major disasters, not only will Donald Trump be reelected, he'll be reelected in a landslide. And I'm saying that.
I think it was a prominent Democrat from Arkansas, I can't remember his name, who said, quote, "It's the economy, stupid," unquote. Wasn't that the slogan of the Democratic Party in the 90s?
And that same person you're talking about was the only one in the Hillary camp that knew she was going to lose. He told his wife, you better start campaigning in Michigan. They had written those states off because they were.
Oh, those were in the bag. Those states were in the bag.
Right.
Well, didn't he say that on the air? Or... Well, I mean, he said it publicly anyway.
Bill Clinton was no dummy. I mean, you can criticize, you may disagree with his policies, but Bill Clinton was a very shrewd individual. He didn't get to where he attained from Arkansas.
And he was a great campaigner.
Yeah.
And I met him twice, on escort. I rode the police motorcycles on escort details, and after the detail is over, usually the main person that you're doing, they line when they're getting back on the plane, they line up and they shake hands. And Clinton is a very personable and a great campaigner. Hillary was absolutely atrocious. That line I used to, and she don't you think it's time that we had a woman in the White House? And supposedly they told her, Hillary, that's not the way you deliver that line. Here's the way you deliver that. Don't you think it's time we got a woman in the White House? And she just couldn't bring herself to. That's a Bill would campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
But every time she said, "Don't you think it's time?" Her handlers and her advisors are probably going, "Oh my God!"
And you can't campaign for president Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 2 in the afternoon until 4 in the afternoon. I mean, that's not a presidential campaign.
She was doing
you know?
banker's hours. I didn't know.
Yeah. Plus,
Yeah.
she thought, well, the who was it? The New York Times on the day of the election had her 90%.
Oh yeah.
Right.
All the experts. I love watching the experts. When first of all, they all laughed when Trump announced his candidacy. Then they laughed at him all the way. Then they say, Barack said something about, well, the difference is that I am was president of the United States, and he'll never be.
Yeah, yeah.
The one expert I remember, he's standing in front of a huge display. This is just before the Republican National Convention. And he had absolutely overwhelming statistics, his statistics, of course, saying that there is no possible way, 0% of a chance, that Donald Trump will get nominated on the first ballot at the convention. And he showed
Charts.
He went state by state, and well, guess what? He was wrong.
Well, I remember the weekend before the election, the Sunday before the election, when those Sunday morning talk shows, I think it was ABC, and they were already talking about who was going to be in Hillary's cabinet. They were talking about the prospective members of who's going to be Secretary of State, the big offices, Secretary of Defense. And then finally the host said, well, maybe we ought to put this discussion off until next week. Wait until she's elected.
Why should we do that?
I'm very proud of the fact. I told a friend of mine at about 2 in the afternoon on election day, I said, tonight around midnight or 1 o'clock, Hillary's going to come out and she's going to say, I want to thank you for electing me president of the United States. And Bill is going to come up and say, Hillary, darling, you didn't win. You lost. I did not lose. I did not. And I said, they're going to probably have to pull her away from the podium. She'll have her fingers dug into the podium. They're going to have to drag.
But we have to keep remembering that she got about 3 million more votes than Donald.
Yeah, but
that doesn't count.
But they don't pay. We don't pay off on the popular vote. And
And
most
a lot of
countries
people
don't.
wanted to change that
Yeah.
then.
well, yeah, because
of
they
that.
lost. If
Thank
they would have
God
won,
they
then you would have
didn't.
never heard about it.
And most countries don't elect their highest official by popular vote. One of the few that does is Russia. Putin was elected by a direct popular vote. There's no electoral college in the Russian Federation.
Right.
So if you want a direct popular vote, you might want to look into Vladimir Putin. You evidently admire Vladimir Putin, and you'd
Right.
like to have a system similar to the one that elected Vladimir Putin.
There
What
was
about
a,
most of the
slight
European
technicality
Yeah,
with.
they're parliamentary.
There was a slight
Popular
technicality.
community. You elect members of
Written,
the
of course.
parliament
You're
and the
right.
majority,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that the party that wins a majority in the parliament, in the German Bundestag
That's a
or the
great
British,
distinction.
does not necessarily control the popular vote, because you could win a lot of districts by a narrow margin, where the other party wins its districts by lopsided margins.
Right.
It can work out. So the popular vote no one pays off on the popular vote other than the Russians and the French.
Well,
the French
the
elect the
French,
president.
okay.
They
Right.
elect the president by a direct popular
But
vote.
if we
as well.
went by popular vote, a Republican couldn't get reelected because the East Coast and the West Coast have more popular vote than the rest of the
This
country.
is a temporary thing. Richard Nixon got 60% of the vote in 1972. Ronald Reagan got 60% of the vote in 1984. Bush Sr. got 55% of the popular vote in 1988. This is a relatively recent development. And we got a couple of minutes. Let me tell you, Donald Trump carried the total popular vote in 49 of the 50 states. Total up the popular vote. Trump carried the majority of the popular vote in 49 of the 50 states.
There's California.
He also carried the total popular vote, I think, I think there are 56 counties in California. If you add in 55 of the 56 counties in California, Trump still won the popular vote. Hillary's entire popular vote majority came from one county, Los Angeles County, California, which she carried by 4 million. Well, I don't know what the margin was. So if you think Hollywood, which is located in Los Angeles County, if you think Los Angeles County should be the determining factor of who's president of the United States, then you'd love to have this direct popular vote.
Right.
But this could change.
Sure.
10 years from now, the numbers may have flipped and the Republican candidates may be winning the popular vote, in which case the Democrats will say, we want to go back to the Electoral College. You know,
Right.
so-
Yeah.
You know, another thing that I just remembered about my friend Senator Harris from California, no less, she made a statement that when she's elected, maybe she should talk to Hillary about this, but when she's elected, she will give Congress 100 days to deliver a comprehensive gun control bill.
And if not, they'll all be shot.
Yeah, right. And if not, she will executive
Issue
order.
a decree.
That statement alone will probably be her demise.
Oh, yeah.
We heard this. You're right.
Well, then yesterday, I don't know if it was her or not, but they said if I'm elected president, I will release half of the prisoners in all our prisons.
Bernie Sanders has said something to that.
Yeah, he did.
I have heard. I didn't hear it, so I can't test, but I have heard that
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders said something along those lines.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Now the prisoners can vote, so
Yeah.
I got the prisoner vote locked up.
Right. Well,
Our founding fathers considered a direct popular vote, and they discarded it, and they decided on the Electoral College. And the Electoral College has served this country well. The Electoral College gave us Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan. I think that's a pretty good record. I think that's a
But
pretty
John,
good record.
it shows how smart our founding fathers were to have something like the Electoral College.
that's
I mean, it
right.
was done for a reason, and here it is. How many years later?
235 or
it's,
40.
And people are saying that, no, it's wrong, they want to
well,
change
people
it.
don't even know.
You know.
It's like when people talk about impeaching Donald Trump. They don't even know what impeachment is. The majority of people, this was a survey done, that they think impeachment is something along the lines of a recall election.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
really, they don't have no idea what impeachment is.
Well, impeachment, the House, what is it, 50 plus one? It has to be confirmed
In order
by
to
the Senate.
impeachment means indictment. First of all,
Right,
people
yeah.
think impeachment means removal, and it doesn't.
right.
Impeachment is the same as indictment.
Clinton was impeached.
The House can impeach a president with half of the vote plus one, with
Right.
a simple majority of the House. To remove a president, that's done by the Senate, and that requires a two-thirds vote, which means 67 senators.
Which would never, ever.
And right now, the
happen.
Republicans have 53 seats in the Senate. So if you think you're going to get 67 votes in a Senate where there are 53 Republicans, good luck to
Right,
you.
even Nancy Pelosi said, you know what, this isn't the right. We're not going down this road.
And even the Democrats who won in this last election by a small majority, are they going to vote in the Senate to convict him?
There are
And they have to run for re-election every 2 years. So,
Our Senate has 45 Democrats and 2 independents,
Right.
Bernie Sanders and Angus King, who are Democrats, but they call themselves independents. So they need 20 more Republicans to vote to remove Donald Trump.
It just wouldn't happen. Right.
Let me just make one little footnote. We were talking before about Bernie Epton, his great good qualities. I think he should have overridden some of his advisors who thought that the slogan he could run under was "Vote for Bernie before it's too late." That comes out
That's negative.
as racist.
Yeah, right.
It could be accused of racist, very subtle
And
racist.
he lost by 30,000, I believe, 30,000 votes. And 2 Chicago police detectives, just by a review of the voting rolls, could knock off 50,000 voters just by addresses like, 27 1902 Northeast Laverne, you know,
Right.
or names like Mickey Mouse.
And if I can just say before we go to break, I had the pleasure, I served a term in the legislature. I can't claim I was a close friend of Bernie Epton. He had been there, he had a lot of seniority beyond my one term. But I met him, talked to him a number of times. He was a terrific guy, and he was one of the most respected members of the General Assembly. He was a sharp man, a lawyer, he was a brilliant attorney, respected. He would have been a great mayor. He would have been a very great mayor, and a very honest and fair-minded mayor.
What was his fate after he lost to Washington? I don't know whether he died young.
He did not live much longer than that. He died. I can't tell you exactly. So he did not live many more years beyond that.
Well,
But
gentlemen, you've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians, and we thank you for it. We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you looking for a place to have some printing done? Well, I have the right place for you to go, and that is the printing store in Oak Park, Illinois. Call or see Phil Berry at 621 Madison Street, or call 708-383-3638. Phil Berry will sit down with you and help you plan whatever you need printed. Now, his products are brochures, booklets, business cards, catalogs, envelopes, letterheads, flyers, invitations, newsletters, notepads, menus, mailers, manuals, labels, posters, postcards, price list, NCR forms, sale sheets, table tents, pocket folders, and presentation forms. And he also has 1 to 4 color offset printing, digital copying, high-speed copying, graphic designs, typesetting, laminating, foil stamping, die cutting, and imprinting. And his complete bindery service includes booklets, cutting, scoring, folding, numbering, padding, and drilling. So once again, for all your printing needs, call or see Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. They are located at Madison Street and Clarence, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And that's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or give Phil Berry a call at 708-383-3638. For all your printing needs, the printing store was there to help you. They're 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois. And once again, you can call Phil Berry at 708-383-3638.
Now, back to our show. John.
thank you very much, Rich Lang, our announcer, the star of Old Time Radio. We're back again with our August edition. Let me mention, this is the Chicago Historians. Of course, the month of August is named for Rome's first and greatest emperor, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus. The Emperor Augustus, who was the great nephew, and he was truly a great nephew, of Julius Caesar. And he is a man who makes a cameo appearance every year at Christmas time, because when you attend midnight mass or midnight services or Christmas services in a Catholic church, Protestant church, an Anglican church, you will hear the words, and the word, or something approximating, and the word went forth from Caesar Augustus, that there should be a census of the entire world. So he has this cameo role every year in the birth of Christ, and he was a truly great man. So that's where the name August comes from. the Roman Senate renamed that month in honor of Augustus Caesar, as July was renamed for his uncle Julius Caesar. July is named in honor of the original Gaius Julius Caesar, who was murdered in the Senate of Rome on 44 BC. So that's the origin of August. We are honoring a great man, Caesar Augustus, Rome's first and greatest emperor.
You know, John, you just mentioned the census. Has that issue been resolved on the census about whether or not the question regarding your citizenship?
They've finally thrown in the towel. They decided there just wasn't enough time to appeal it again, because the court's decision was narrow. The court didn't flat out rule that the citizenship could not be included on the census, but that the government hadn't made a sufficient case for it.
Right.
And apparently there just wasn't enough time, because the documents have to be printed, and consequently it won't.
Wasn't that the first time they said there wasn't enough reason to do it? Usually the Supreme Court either says yes or no, and they don't really.
Yeah, the Supreme Court likes that. They also like the punt. They'll sometimes they just won't take up an issue.
But they don't say the reason why they.
Well, whatever it was, they in the immediate aftermath, they were going to try to deal with it, but apparently they decided it just wasn't enough time because of the needs of printing these forms up and getting them into the mail. So
My personal opinion is that the illegals are not going to be responding to the census, so it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah.
Because anything to do with the government, of course, I have to laugh when politicians talk about it's time that these people come out of the shadows.
Or the cemeteries.
Obviously, you have never driven down 26th Street, 18th Street, 63rd Street, Blue Island, because believe me when I tell you this, they are out of the shadows. There is no doubt that they are out of the shadows.
Right.
It's interesting that the way in which the Democrats and the left in general have waged sort of unrelenting guerrilla warfare against Trump. Every single step he has taken, he has been fought with lawsuits, with problems in Congress, and this. You can't remember Republicans treating Obama this way. I mean, it was totally different.
No, they couldn't. Right.
You remember when the Republicans, when someone suggested impeachment, when the Republicans regained a majority of the House, we have no intention of even contemplating impeachment. We wouldn't think of impeaching the president. No. This is a new way of governing, that when you're in the minority, you fight tooth and nail every single step the president takes. Democrats may have not thought this through, because
it's going to backfire.
The day may come when there's a Democratic president again,
right,
and maybe the Republicans will have learned something from all of this. I'm not optimistic about it.
They're not. This country is a big, probably the biggest company in the world, and it's always been run by a politician. So we now have a businessman running this business and this company, and they're just not used to it.
That's right.
They're just not used to it, and what he's doing is running it like a business, and
That's right.
God bless him, he's doing all right.
You think of when FDR became president, we've also always heard about the 100 days and all the things that Roosevelt accomplished in the first 100 days. If the Republicans had fought him tooth and nail, the way the Democrats are fighting
That's
Trump,
right.
they could have filibustered and blocked everything in the Senate. They would have been run out of town. I mean, they would have been accused of being un-American, unpatriotic, of the people have elected a president. He's trying to get the country out of the Depression. How dare... It's just a totally different attitude today, that you use everything but the kitchen sink to prevent a president from achieving his goals.
They didn't have that word racist at that time.
No. But if you think about it, during the Second World War, and I might be wrong, but as far as running the government in the companies, he pretty much suspended the Constitution. I mean, he told all the the companies, you're going to make this, you're going to make that, you're going to make this.
Wartime powers. That you
Yeah,
It's wartime, yeah.
yeah.
Abraham Lincoln exercised tremendous wartime power. So
That's
did
right.
Woodrow Wilson.
Well,
And he
okay.
got rid of habeas corpus. I mean, Lincoln is often accused by his detractors of that.
Lincoln
To win the
said,
war, yeah.
as commander-in-chief in time of war, I have the power to take any measure deemed necessary to subdue the enemy.
Well, that's what I was thinking
I
about
can do
Roosevelt.
anything.
Yeah.
Lincoln used to talk about what he called the war power. And
Yeah.
you won't find that in the Constitution. There's no term
No.
war power. But Lincoln firmly believed the president in time of war can do virtually anything in
So-
order to defeat the enemy.
That's where I'm getting my thing, or virtually, he kind of suspended the. Because a regular person,
Was it
if they
suspended?
badmouth Roosevelt, they
Constitu-
could be arrested.
No, that was true of that was true of Woodrow. No, FDR didn't put in those kind of rules. No,
No
Wilson did
restrictions
that.
in World War One.
Wilson did that in
right.
World War One. They had acts. You could be arrested for speaking against the president or
Right.
against the war.
Criticizing
FDR
government.
did not do that.
Okay.
FDR did not put that sort
Okay.
of thing in.
I got
place.
it wrong then.
Probably because he had been in the Wilson administration and
Right.
he had seen how that had worked. But no. FDR was essentially following in a tradition that had already been established, that in time of war the president can constitutionally, he has tremendous power as commander-in-chief.
Okay, that's where I was.
And it proves it by the next guy, Truman, using the bomb.
Well, the one exception when he tried to increase the number on the Supreme Court, and it turned out it was the Supreme Court who shot him down.
Well, his own party, his
that
own
far.
Democrats wouldn't go with it. It was an
I-
unpopular.
I wasn't there, so I don't remember.
It was unpopular. The fact is, I mean, FDR was a brilliant man, but even FDR made mistakes,
Yeah.
and everybody agrees. His closest supporters said this is a mistake. You're not going to get this through.
It's strange that he didn't know that at the time. He'd wonder how he
Right.
could get it.
He had a majority in both houses of Congress. He had Democrat majorities in both
Right.
houses of Congress, and his own party wouldn't go along with him.
Right.
Well, one of the things from some of the leftist candidates that are running for the Democratic nomination, now that the Supreme Court has a leaning to the right,
Oh yeah.
that now, we'll do away with it, or add, or
Increase the
right,
numbers.
because they realize that it's going to be, and if another, if and when Trump gets reelected, I think there's going to be another justice that is either going to resign or drop dead.
It could happen even before the
Right,
election. You never
right.
know. You
Right,
just
exactly.
never know.
So that'd be another
Right.
Trump nominee.
And not everyone realizes the number 9 is not fixed in the
No,
Constitution.
there is no number fixed.
Congress can increase or decrease
Decrease it,
the number
right.
of justices
They
on
could
the
go
court
to 3. Yeah,
at any time. Now, if they tried to decrease the number of sitting justices, there'd probably be a challenge. That would be tied up in court probably
Oh, yeah.
to try to, because that would be like removing. But they could create 11 or 13 or 15. There's no law that says the Supreme Court. There's no constitutional provision that it has to be 9.
But
wonder how they came
there
up
is
with
a
9 in the first
there
place.
is an unspeaking
It's been 9 for a long
law that it has to be an odd number, though, right?
Well,
That
it
would
makes
help,
no.
yeah.
It's no, but it just
No, I'm saying unspoken.
it's an unspoken.
It may-
There's
it just
always
makes
been an
sense.
odd number because you don't want a tie vote.
Right.
You don't want a tie vote in the.
But another thing, getting back to these comments made by leftist Democrats about, I've talked about the situation in Ferguson, that the facts do not support. This was a murder of a innocent black man who had his hands up by a white racist police officer. Didn't happen. Another thing, one of the candidates, I don't know if they're still running or not, but in the Kavanaugh hearings for his seat in the Supreme Court, after he was seated, a female candidate said, and we now have a rapist. We have a rapist on the Supreme Court. Now, there was never, ever any accusation whatsoever ever of rape.
Of course not.
It was misconduct, sexual misconduct, but there was never, ever. But the media puts this out, and people that are stupid, for lack of a better word, hear this and think it's true.
Well,
He might have thought it was implied
but-
as wild parties.
right. But didn't somebody when they were trying to get him in, didn't some woman accuse him of rape?
No.
That one
I hear
Ford.
rape.
I think her name was Ford.
Yeah, she accused him of sexual misconduct. on top
What was the
of it.
difference between
Well,
that?
that's tricky right there. Yeah,
Right.
Where's one become the other?
I mean, you could
Words.
put your hand on her shoulder, and that might constitute it. I don't
No,
know.
they're not being raped.
Well, there is a definition of rape, and there was never any allegation that occurred.
No, but there was not allegation, but there was hinting at it.
Well,
Well,
and those
and who was-
people,
who
those
was-
people are very.
Somebody come up with
And I
a number of
disagree.
women said that you
Don,
did
I
it.
disagree, and I'll tell you why. Because if there was, they would have said it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
No,
Okay,
doubt
If
yeah,
there was, if
you're
there
right.
was any plausible
Right,
way
right.
they could have used that, oh,
Yeah.
absolute, that would have been plastered all
and
over
they
every
knew, and they knew
newspaper.
better.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Right.
But it's this general rule that the left can get away with anything. The left can say anything at all about anybody,
Exactly.
and no one takes them to task because the media are the left, because the
Right.
media is
Right.
part of their group. So they're not going to cause them any heartache by questioning what they say. Or if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, everything you say, they're going to be challenged. They're going to say, "Oh, he's lying. There's no truth to this. There's no evidence. We've investigated." The left gets a pass. They have a
They're
free
right.
ride.
Right.
They have a
See-
free
see-
ride on whatever they say.
Speaking-
Right.
You can say anything you want about Donald Trump. Trump is
Right.
like a free fire zone.
Well-
you can say anything you want. You can call him and he has been called a fascist, a racist,
Right.
been compared to Hitler, to Stalin, fine traitor.
Right.
But let Trump criticize somebody on the left. Oh, I guess Trump criticized a couple of panelists on Fox News, Juan Williams and Donna Brazil. He's a racist.
Right.
He's already they're already saying he's a racist because he criticized. Now they criticize him all the time.
And Donna,
problem.
and Donna
No
Brazil lost all credibility when she admitted that she gave the questions to
Hillary Clinton because
Yeah.
she knew what the questions
How-
were going
how-
to be on the CNN debate.
I mean, how do you treat someone like that? It's like Al Sharpton after his what was it, Tawana Brawley incident, when it totally made up a rape of a black
course.
woman, totally a lie. How does he still have credibility?
Because the rule for the left is there are no rules. You can say whatever you want, do
And,
whatever you
and,
want.
and
Wasn't
it's
there a
and it's a
newspaper-
brilliant effect when they do that to create these problems
Right.
and to put it in the
And
minds
they're-
of these kids and these younger generation and the voters that aren't smart enough to figure it out.
Right. I might,
To John's statement, say anything they want. Some reporter, and I don't know why, asked Al Sharpton when he was ordained or where he was ordained. This is true. He said, I was ordained when I was 5 years old.
right. I remember that.
He said that. And no follow-up.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
5 years old? Yeah, well,
Was-
I received my
Very
doctorate when I was 2.
Right.
I mean, it's right. You can get what they say, whatever they want, and just get away with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the media who are the ones who are the arbiters of this, they're not going to take them to task for anything they say. They're not going to challenge anything they say. They're not going to challenge their own side.
I might be, changing it, but I think it was this weekend, maybe last weekend, one of the newspapers' magazine sections, he says all our articles between now and the election will be essentially, and it's paraphrasing it, calling Donald a racist or putting him in a bad light.
Yeah.
No matter what he says or what he does, we're going to...
Like I said, lose the argument, attack the man. That's what's
Well, I think
in
the
logic,
whole-
argumentum ad hominem. Is that the correct terminology?
I think their whole idea is if you tell a lie enough times, people are going to accept it
So
as
that's
fact.
basic.
Well, that was the
Yeah,
old
yeah,
concept
yeah.
of the big lie,
Right.
which goes back to Goebbels and the Nazis. If you tell a lie over and over again, a lot of people are going to believe it.
Well, guess
There are
what's
people
happened these
today who
days.
believe that we didn't land on the moon. They believe that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
all a hoax, that it was all done in a studio. There are people who believe that, that Lincoln, I mean, all the conspiracy theories about Lincoln.
And
And there are
JFK,
people who believe this stuff and all sorts of other things. That there's something about human nature. You want to believe that there's something sinister and that there are these
Right.
dark
There's a
forces
conspiracy
behind the
out.
scenes
Exactly
that are controlled. They like to believe that
Because they
wanna
can stretch
believe
it out.
the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
Well,
There are
they-
people who actually they'll tell you that these pictures, that's
it's a-
all phony.
it's a
all
society.
these pictures from space, it's
They
all
have
fake.
their own organization, the
Yeah,
Flat Earth.
Society.
Yeah.
well,
They'll say it's round. Yeah, the Earth is round, but it's a disc. It's like a discus. You know.
Right.
It's not a globe. It's flat.
Just to lighten up with something interesting out of the recent news, are we going to acquire Greenland?
Oh yeah, that's a good. Where
I
did
like that.
Where did that story originate?
All these popular electoral votes that I will give.
It's apparently a possibility. Apparently, the
didn't
Danes
Truman-
are open
But
to
Denmark, I
discussion.
think, has refused to sell. I think they've said.
Have they? I thought they
I
said they
believe
were
it.
open to discussion.
No, they said that they don't, the people there don't want it.
Oh,
Let's have a popular
Well, I guess
vote among Greenland.
well,
I
didn't
guess I should withdraw my order.
Truman bring that up sometime?
Truman?
we
Greenland?
occupied Iceland in World War II when Denmark fell to the
That's
Nazis.
a good point.
The United States Army landed in Iceland and occupied it. And I think we had forces in Greenland as well as the British did, because we didn't want those territories to fall into the hands of the Germans. We didn't want the Germans to show up and put up a sign saying under new management,
Right.
because they had conquered Denmark
Right.
and figured that this was thrown in as part of the deal.
Kind of a stretch of the nose.
Well, was it-
The United States offered to buy one of those territories after World War II. This is not a new idea. The United States was interested in buying either Greenland or Iceland. It probably was Greenland after World War II, but at the time the Danes didn't want to go through with it because it was for strategic reasons, putting air bases and
Right. Well, we've got our
defense
biggest
bases.
air base on Greenland.
We have bases there. Yeah,
How do you
But
pronounce that?
what-
Thule?
Thule,
Thule.
Thule, Greenland.
Wasn't
True.
I think the president of whoever owns Greenland, he says
King.
we've got a
Greenland.
good
Greenland's a
economy,
queen.
but it's not for sale.
Greenland has a queen, Queen Margaret.
And then there's also a rumor that Trump is going to visit Greenland. I guess it's the first president that ever.
That'd be interesting.
But go back to wars.
They're supposedly.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it wasn't every war that I think the U.S. started was politically motivated.
First of all,
Every war.
a number of our wars.
Most of our wars were expansionistic.
Well, first of all, I mean, we didn't start
Mexico, Spain.
World War II. We didn't start World War I.
No,
We
but
didn't
there was a-
start the Korean War.
Right.
We didn't start the Civil War. I mean,
Or
there
Vietnam.
aren't that many wars that the United States, quote, started. In most of these wars, we were the aggrieved party.
Right.
The
Didn't
war,
the
the
US
war began
invade
when the
Canada?
Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and then Hitler declared war on us.
You would know.
Well,
Didn't
Canada was an occasional target in the War of 1812.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right. Didn't we invade it?
That could have been our 14th
Yeah, we-
state. Yes,
yeah,
we
we
did
did,
invade.
yeah.
We wanted to take Quebec. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they wouldn't be
But it
speaking
didn't work out.
French.
Maybe with the citizens of Canada, I don't think we're so eager to join the United
They
States.
wouldn't be speaking English, but they would be speaking American. There's a difference.
We have taken Canada.
We were interested even in the War of Independence. There was thought that the Canadian colonies might want to join us.
Wait a minute.
Where's that?
So,
Canadians.
Just
But
a
they're-
the Canucks, yeah. But yeah, so I mean, the idea of the United States, buying, acquiring Greenland is not a brand new idea. That idea did come up, and we did have troops stationed there during the war to keep the Nazis out.
It was a pretty good idea when we bought Alaska. And
Oh God!
Yeah.
in the western,
Yeah,
what do
it
they
was
call it? The
bargain.
western
Two-week
suburbs,
folly.
or not
Yeah.
suburbs, but the western.
One of our greatest secretaries of state, William H. Seward, who bought Alaska, and his career he was just pilloried
It's
and
called Seward's Folly.
just lambasted,
Pilloried? Pilloried.
mocked in the cartoons. They had cartoons showing him with a wheelbarrow and this huge block of ice with the word Alaska written on the block of ice. And it showed the Russian Tsar counting the money that the idea
Right.
was that he had been taken to the cleaners. We when you think of the in modern money, the billions of dollars of gold that were taken out of Alaska.
Wasn't
And
it,
oil.
Billions of dollars worth of oil that have come out of Alaska.
was it Japan who invaded Alaska?
They
through
took-
the Bering Straits?
They invaded the two tiny islands in the Aleutians, Attu and Kiska.
Oh, okay.
The tiniest, outermost islands of the. If you ever see a map of Alaska, there's this little kind of a sickle-shaped chain of islands coming out
Okay.
south, and they took the two on the farthest tip of the Aleutians,
Okay.
Attu and Kiska, and we eventually took them back in. I think in '44 we landed there and took them back again. but
But we knew they were
the illusions.
Going, yeah.
People going up there and working love it. They
It's
love
cold,
it.
and I don't like cold. But I'm from Arkansas, like another guy was from.
But since you mentioned that, I want to bring something up. We got about 5 minutes because last Thursday was the 250th birthday of a man who in some ways was one of the great benefactors of the United States. He's one of the most famous men who ever lived, Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August the 15th, 1769, and last Thursday would have been his 250th birthday. He was a great general, a great conqueror, a great ruler. He became the Emperor of the French. But the reason I mention him is it was Napoleon Bonaparte who sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States of America in 1803
He was their buddy.
for $15 million.
That's a good price.
And it doubled the size of the United States of America. Thomas Jefferson, who was president at that time, knew that the French were interested in doing something with this territory. He had authorized his negotiators to spend up to $10 million for just the city of New Orleans, just to buy the city of New Orleans. And he said, and as much territory east of New Orleans, he was thinking in the direction of Florida, that we could acquire for $10 million. His negotiator bought the entire Louisiana territory for $15 million.
Wow.
And when Jefferson got this proposal, it was more than he had offered. $15 million is a lot of money for the United States at that time. But Jefferson was afraid that if we didn't take it, if the French ever established a colony, if the French ever really became concentrated, started sending troops,
Right.
we would have to throw them out. And the United States in 1800 was not of a stature to fight Napoleon.
Right.
We would have had to align with the British. And Jefferson was reluctant. But Jefferson said, if the French become established, we will have to connect ourselves body and soul to the British and to their navy.
Right.
And so this was an opportunity that Jefferson could not turn down.
Okay.
He didn't believe he had the authority to do it. Jefferson believed that the Constitution was literal. What you find in the Constitution is what you can do, and if it isn't in the Constitution, you can't do it.
Sounds like a fight we're having now.
And he was very much what they call a strict constructionist. He couldn't find any authority in the Constitution for the president to acquire an empire, which is what Louisiana was.
But nothing that he couldn't.
But that's just it.
Yeah.
He finally persuaded himself there was nothing that said he couldn't do it. And so he did an act which would have made Alexander Hamilton proud. Hamilton was of the opposite. Hamilton believed in this the idea the Constitution can be expansively interpreted, you can do whatever. He did what his political enemies had always favored doing.
Right.
He bought the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. We got not just New Orleans, but this huge empire. And it works out, I think, to about 4 cents an acre. He
That was
spent
a good
4
price.
cents an acre for it.
Louisiana Purchase.
Louisiana
Question.
Purchase.
What got Napoleon banished to that island?
We lost the war. He was defeated.
Oh, okay.
He was defeated in Europe in 1850. First, he was defeated in 1814, and they exiled him to a little island in the Mediterranean
Right.
called Elba, where he could still be an emperor. He could still rule the island.
Right.
And if he had stayed there, he would have died in old. But he decided to come back again and reconquer France. He landed in France and began what I think they call in France the 100 Days. He went back to Paris, raised an army, and that army met Wellington at Waterloo in 1815, and that was his final defeat. Then they stuck him on a rock in the South Atlantic called St. Helena, where there was nothing but dodo birds, and he spent the rest of his life, which was only 6 years, he died in 1821, on this tiny windswept rock in the middle of nowhere in the South Atlantic called St. Helena.
Okay.
But before he did that, he transferred this vast territory to the United States. And Napoleon knew what he was doing, because it said that he knew that France couldn't hold the Louisiana Territory against the British and the Americans together. He didn't want to see the Americans allied with England. And he thought, if I give this to America, The United States will grow and one day become a great power and will rival England. And how right he was. He thought that this was the beginning of America becoming a great empire of its own.
Right.
And he sold. He knew he couldn't use it, and so he sold it to the United States for this bargain basement price of $50 million. It is this one act that makes Thomas Jefferson a great president. He was a great man. He wrote our Declaration of Independence. He was a genius. But as president, his 8 years in the White House were really not all that successful. The one thing that he did was spectacular.
Right.
He bought the Louisiana Territory, and that alone entitles him to
Right.
be up there on Mount Rushmore
That's right.
as one of the great presidents of the
He
United
didn't have to do
States.
anything else. That
He
was
was
enough.
the greatest empire builder in American history, doubled the size of this country without firing a shot. While Europeans were losing thousands of men over little strips of territory, he creates an empire in the New World. So that's my tribute to Napoleon and Thomas Jefferson.
And with that, another commercial interruption. We'll be right back after these messages of interest and importance.
Do you suffer from pain? Do you know someone that has constant pain of their low back, neck, shoulder, knee, or wrist? Have they tried medications, exercise, physical therapy, or chiropractic, and nothing seemed to make it better? Well, I may have your answer. Why not try a napropath? Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Wayne Chickowitz, and I've been practicing 30 years treating pain. I'm board certified and hold a diplomate in pain management. For your convenience, we have 2 locations. In Cicero, 3602 South 61st Avenue, 708-656-7000, or in Villa Park at 122 West St. Charles Road, Suite 1A, 630-833-4007. Why not try a napropath and stop the pain today?
Now back to our discussion. John?
Thank you very much, Rich. We're back with our August edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. We've talked a little bit about the news. We've talked about kids going back to school and how un-American it is to go back to school before Labor Day. And once again, somebody ought to do something about that. And we've talked a little bit about politics, about Donald Trump. We talked a little bit about the Great Louisiana Purchase. And the last Thursday was the 250th birthday of Napoleon Bonaparte, who, among other reasons for being a memorable figure, was the man who sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States and doubled the size of our country. So we've had a lot of things to talk about here today.
John, one of the things we haven't, it's been in the news constantly, is Chicago, the crime rate, but mostly people talk about gun control. And I'd like to start off on that. What are we going to do about it?
Well, I heard someone made an interesting comment about why is it that when a police officer shoots a black man,
Bring me a second glass.
no one ever blames the gun? Why is that? In all the other shootings, they blame the gun. When a police officer shoots a black man, they never blame the gun. They blame the guy that pulled the trigger.
I didn't hear that, but that's
Yeah,
interesting.
It's an excellent point.
Yeah. Well, it's not the gun. You know, we should all know that. I could put my gun right here on the table, and it would stay there until I left. But it's not going to get up and shoot Rich Lang.
Well, that's what I always said about, you hear the term gun violence thrown around. If guns are violent, then the area where they have the most guns would naturally be the most violent.
Exactly.
And the direct is opposite. The state of Wyoming, per capita, has the most guns of anywhere in the United States. So, therefore, state of Wyoming should be a pretty violent place, based on the assumptions that guns are violent, because that's where the most per capita guns are.
So
And it's the direct opposite. The cities that have the strictest gun laws have the most
Thank you, John.
gun violence, quote, unquote. You cannot blame an inanimate object for something occurs, because if that was the case, you could blame knives and forks for obesity.
I've never seen a gun walking down the street shooting people.
Well, that's what I say when they talk about gun violence. When I get up in the morning, I always check my guns to see if any one of them got out during the night and stuck up a 7-Eleven.
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly.
But again, getting back to the point that I was making, when a police officer shoots someone, especially a black man, they never blame the gun. It's never the gun's fault. But in all these other shootings, it's the gun's fault.
Right.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and they say Chicago has the most gun laws in the country, but having the gun laws and enforcing them are two different things.
Yes, they have the strictest gun laws,
Right.
as
So
other
does New York.
cities do too.
yeah, no, you're right. Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C.
Right.
And
right.
there's still a lot of
And
violence.
there's federal gun laws, and it's true that a lot of these happenings, and I use that as a odd word, happenings, of these guys going out with their AR-15s and shooting 20, killing 20, 30 people at a time. It should be that these people are mentally disturbed.
The other
And
argument,
I think, hold it, Tom. I think that some of that problem is the states, maybe the federal, but the state of Illinois years ago shut down the mental hospitals, the mental
Like Dunning.
deals, like Dunning, and but there were other like neighborhood places too,
Right.
Rich. And since then, we've had a terrible time. I mean, not only with the gun deal and killing people by shooting them, but a lot of other things too. You know, you can ask Tom, the police, me with the fire, the mental problems that you run into on the job.
That's right.
And of course, you go after the guns.
Well, they're talking about AR-15s. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the only difference between an AR-15 and a semi-automatic hunting rifle is the shape, isn't it?
right? It looks
It looks different. It looks menacing.
It's scary.
Yeah, and the amount of ammo that you put in the clip, and
The argument that I hear constantly is, what does someone need an AR-15 for? The key word is need. What do they need it for?
What does somebody? What does somebody need the New York Times for?
Right.
Does anybody? Does anybody really need the New York Times?
To the liberal that makes the comment, what do I need an AR-15? And I don't happen to own an AR-15, but using it as an argument.
Right.
My term back to them is, what do you need a 8,000 square foot home
Right.
with 8 bedrooms, 6 baths, an acre of land that uses up a lot of water, 5 cars in your garage?
Right.
You explain to me what you need that for, and then I'll explain to you what I need.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's the answer.
It's a stupid argument.
Because I want it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's legal. I
It's
can own
called
it, and I
freedom.
want it.
It's called freedom.
And because
Absolutely, John.
you can have it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, our form of government and our liberties are not based on what somebody thinks you need or you don't need. That's in a
Absolutely.
totalitarian system. The big boss at the top tells you what you need and what you don't need. But we're not organized that way. The term assault rifle is one that the left likes to use, the news media. That's a totally fictitious term. The military does not use the term assault rifle.
Right.
You won't find that designation anywhere in the Army manuals or the Pentagon's documentation. assault rifle is simply a fictitious term for a gun that the left wants to take away from you.
That's right.
Whenever there's a mass shooting, we're told it was done by an assault rifle. But when 6 people or 8 people or a dozen people are shot in Chicago in a weekend, and others are shot in Detroit or Baltimore or Los Angeles or every other city in America, most of those take place with handguns. They're not people
Right.
are not, most of these shootings you hear of on the radio every Monday, well, there were 8 people shot, there were 48 people shot over the weekend and 7 of them were killed.
Right.
Most of those are not with, quote, assault rifles.
Right.
And you never hear them saying that there's this great crisis that we've got to get into these cities, all of which are run by the wrong political party, unfortunately, from the left's point of view. But you don't hear them saying we've got a crisis in our country. We've got to go to Chicago and stop all this shooting that's going on there. We got to do something to get that under. No, that it's we want to take away the law-abiding citizen's right to own a long gun.
Here's a question. I wasn't the first one that asked it, but I ask a lot of people now that they're talking about, especially again, I keep on referring to my friend Senator Harris about gun laws and more gun laws. What do you think would have a greater effect on shootings, especially gang-involved shootings? More gun laws or more fathers in the home?
No question.
Right.
Yeah.
No question.
Right.
But that would be saying that the people that are pulling the trigger are actually the problem. So it's much easier to have the anti-gun thing. Like, one of my favorite analogies is somebody's walking down the street and they see a guy looking on the ground, and he's looking and he says to him, "Hey, what happened?" He says, "Oh, I lost my car keys." He said, "Well, I'll help you look for them." So they're looking around. He said, "I don't see anything." He said, "Are you sure you lost them here?" And he says, "No, I lost them over there." Well, what are you looking here for? Well, the light's better.
Right.
And that's the exact same thing. What are you blaming the guns for? Well, it's easier to blame the guns.
Right. And I've always, and this is my definition, I don't know if it's, but assault rifle is dependent on its use.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get a 22 caliber and shoot somebody, and it would be, I would consider it an assault rifle. You can have a 12-gauge shotgun, and that might, if somebody killed somebody, that they were assaulted with a rifle or a shotgun.
Just a name, something that gets out there and
Right.
and
It's a moniker.
makes the people their hair stand on end when they hear that and
Well, let me clarify something, because I'm very ignorant on guns and gun ownership. Is it legal for anybody to own a machine gun?
no.
No, it's been
Federal law.
So who made that distinction that you cannot have a machine
It's a
gun?
federal law,
Yeah.
and I think it goes back to the 1930s, that you cannot own what is called a fully automatic weapon.
Fully automatic.
And by an automatic weapon is one where when you pull the trigger, the bullets start coming out, and they keep coming
You no
out
longer have to
until
keep
you
pulling
release the trigger.
Got it.
A semi-automatic weapon fires each time you pull the trigger without reloading or cocking
Okay.
or slanting a bolt or doing anything of that sort.
Well, where does a weapon that fires them in rounds of 3? Is that considered fully automatic?
If it fires more than one bullet in a burst, it's automatic.
Okay.
Like an M1 Garand, I think, would fire 3 shots in a burst. I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the reason
You could do single shot. Yeah.
they
You
made
had the option. Single shot. Where a Springfield rifle, you had to use, I believe,
Right.
you had to
Right.
work the bolt each time
Right.
you fired it.
But I think, and maybe I'm wrong, it came back from Prohibition, where they were buying Tommy guns.
Yeah.
They were World War I surplus. They were selling them as for hunting coyotes on,
The Tommy gun had been developed in
And-
the First World War. They were
and
called
that was
French brooms.
and the Chicago typewriter.
The first nickname for the machine gun, for the Thompson submachine gun, was a trench broom.
Right.
Because you would get into the German trench,
Right.
and you'd spray everybody there with the bullets.
Right,
It
and
was a
then
trench
Chicago
broom.
got
The
in,
Chicago
and it became.
typewriter,
They made it.
Chicago
They made it.
piano,
Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's where the reputation it got in Chicago. I think
they were-
maybe.
I haven't checked when they were actually band, the ownership. It's in the 20s
I don't either.
or 30s.
A friend of mine,
20s or
a
30s.
fireman in Florida, that was his on his bucket list, I guess you would say. And this is a couple of years ago. He called me and he said, "I finally got the feds finally let me get my Thompson,
Right.
and he's got it."
Yeah.
And it cost him, I think he said something like $23,000.
You can,
Right.
right, you
For
can
that.
get a permit
And-
to own
and-
automatic
right.
weapons.
And
yeah.
that's what he had. He
Right.
had to get a federal permit.
Well,
And the thing, that was way out for me for what he paid for it.
right.
And then I said, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I go to the range once a week and that." And I'm thinking, you imagine what it costs just to buy the shells for a week? I mean, they're going out
there's
like crazy.
There's a range, actually a couple of them out in Las Vegas.
Right.
They advertise you can go in and shoot it
And
fully,
they're-
fully auto.
I think they're 45 caliber, aren't they?
I'm not sure.
I think so, yes.
But there was a gentleman in the city, and he passed away. So we had to clean out his apartment. This guy had all kinds of police badges and all kinds of handguns. We didn't get in trouble for that, but he had a Thompson. We turned it into the cops, and it cost a lot of BS until they finally believed my dad. And I think it was only because he had never had any previous records. or
Right,
anything
you had to
like
have a federal license,
but,
federal.
but this
okay.
was in the early 50s,
Oh,
and if he would have gave it to somebody, he wouldn't have had any problems. But he turned it into the cops, and
Sure.
the cops turned it in. I don't know if it was the FBI or whatever, but I mean, for 6 months he was going round and round with them. Finally, they figured he was telling the truth, and
Sure.
There's a little sidelight on this that I learned. The United States Army always, to this day, emphasizes marksmanship. We've all seen,
Right.
all seen soldiers. Anybody who's been in the military, police do it as well. Marksmanship, the target, carefully aiming and firing, one at a time. And that's what Sergeant York did in 1918. The famous Sergeant Alvin York, when he was picking off the Germans one after the other, because he was, he had learned in Tennessee the art of marksmanship. We found in World War II that soldiers very seldom actually carefully aim and
Right.
fire at a single target. And World War II was the first war in which U.S. forces carried semi-automatic or automatic weapons.
right.
They had the Browning automatic rifle, the BAR,
BAR.
which my dad always talked about. You had the Thompson submachine gun,
right.
which was
You had a grease
You
gun.
had the grease gun, and even the M1 Garand would fire a burst.
semi-
Would fire a burst.
What?
Yeah, I think you could fire 3 shots. I believe you could.
I
fire
know the
3
M60. The first one was fully
I
automatic.
can't swear to that. I mean,
Right.
I've never fired an M1, but I believe you could fire a burst with an M1. It wasn't. You couldn't. It wasn't a machine gun, but I believe you could get.
think
And I
you
may
could
be wrong.
modify
John,
its firing.
M1 was my gun, and there was no way that you could.
No, okay. I stand corrected.
You could
Well,
fire
well, the
anymore.
That
M1
must have been the M14. Then. I think the M14
Could
fired.
be.
That was the
Yes.
first
I think
one.
the M14 fired a burst. But the point was they found that when American combat platoons and squads went into action, it would be the automatic weapons that would fire first. It was the guy with the BAR, with the Thompson would fire first, and they were just pointing in the direction
Raking.
and spraying. They were
Right.
just spraying.
Spray and pray.
And even the M1, you would just point. You didn't have the time in combat to carefully aim
Right.
and shoot at an individual target. So that's where that was the beginning of this notion of the automatic, what we're calling an assault
Right.
rifle. This idea of the soldiers having automatic weapons on the battlefield and using them on the battlefield.
Right. My dad was in there, and he says they would use farmers and farm kids to teach marksmanship because they knew how to shoot.
That's where I learned on the farm.
Right.
And I
And
was thinking
and
the other
lead and
day,
stuff like that.
I was probably 10 years old
Right.
up in Minnesota, and with a bolt action 22 single shot, and my cousin Eddie and I spent the summer going out after the bad bad things around, like birds.
Right.
I'm sure everybody here has seen the TV series Gomer Pyle.
Right.
And we've always seen, Jim Nabors marching in formation with the Marines and Sergeant Carter shouting at him and hollering at him.
Right.
That weapon that Gomer Pyle is carrying is the M14, which was standard issue by that point in the 60s. And the M14 was designed to replace all 4 of those weapons. They didn't want to have 4 different types of weapon in an infantry squad.
Right.
So it replaced the M1 Garand, the Browning automatic rifle, the submachine gun, and the carbine. It also replaced the carbine as well. It was decided to be a general purpose weapon that would, and it had automatic functions. It could
And then they
fire
came out with the M60. And from what I understand, the first one was completely automatic.
the M16.
Yeah. But they used NATO rounds because those were a little bit bigger than a 22, so it was a lot cheaper. And then they came out with the new one, which was a semi-automatic. You could switch it from semi-automatic or rounds of bursts
I think you
of
can
3.
still fire a single shot. You can fire bursts of 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where I got that burst of 3 idea I was talking about.
And that
I could have sworn someone told me once that or maybe they had tinkered with M1s and fixed them where they could fire
Well,
bursts.
almost any semi-automatic, well, not any, but a lot of them, you can convert to full auto.
Right.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
on the
the
internet,
carbines
they
you
sell-
could.
they
It
sell,
had to do
kits.
something with it.
Yeah, right. Well,
Some
that's like the bump stock. The bump stock basically turned a rifle into
Auto.
just the recoil of the bumping against your shoulder. It just
Oh,
fired.
so it just pulled the trigger for you.
A friend of mine told me that in Vietnam there were still units that had the M1. There were Marine units that they liked the M1. The M1 was a very popular weapon.
I
They were still
was
using M1s.
I was in love with that,
You know what the most
and I
popular
still
one
have it too.
was the AK-47 because you could run it in the mud. The tolerances was so loose, it would fire almost anywhere.
Yeah.
It used to be said somewhat facetiously that, well, everybody has the right to own a gun. You cannot control guns, but you sure as heck can control ammo. Maybe that's one way of looking at controlling.
That's not. That's a joke.
Maybe
but-
anybody.
that's what somebody
make
came up
ammo
with.
if they wanted to.
Yeah, that's what somebody came up with it, and I would imagine it was somebody like Hillary that it should cost you $5 a shell or something, and
Well,
that would
up in
stop
Wis-
it.
I heard
John
that.
would know. Up in Wisconsin, you could buy ammo with a gun in a gas station or a
Yeah.
convenience store.
Yeah,
And they didn't ask you anything.
There aren't a lot of police on their confiscating guns. They come across a lot of guns in Chicago. A lot of these guns have come from Indiana. Now, what's the issue there? Lax
Indiana,
Fewer background
Michigan.
checks?
Yeah,
or from gun shows, because it doesn't have a strict background check requirements.
It's
Should anyone have a right to go to a gun show and buy a gun? I just wonder what's going on there.
Sure.
Yeah.
sure.
if you got an FOID card,
Yeah,
Right.
in
No.
Illinois, but
I
I mean,
think you have-
in some states.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
you don't have to have anything.
So
I mean,
should this be federally regulated? Everything that goes away from our form of government to some degree. That the federal government will institute standards
But
for
the
background
thing
checks.
is, the
on shows.
bottom line is the gun does not turn someone violent.
No.
It's you can drive around the state
No.
of Texas and drive into, especially West Texas, and drive into a high school parking lot, and there are gun racks in the back of the pickups with shotguns and rifles in
Right.
the gun rack, parked in a high school parking lot.
And they walk around Dallas carrying long guns and holsters.
We've always heard, well, the people who favor gun control always talk about England, and I am second to none in my admiration for England. I've got a great love of England, but England did not have the history of the individual ownership of firearms that America did. England was settled and civilized 1,000 years before the colonists in the United States. There are historical differences between us, but in spite of the fact that firearms are so scarce in England, they have a tremendous problems with knives. This is not getting a great deal of reporting in the United States, but there are any number of killings, particularly in the big cities, in London, with knives. They've actually passed knife control in England. I believe they now have laws controlling knives and the
Right.
length of knives and the types of knives.
Right.
So the notion you get rid of guns and everything is going to just be wonderful after that. If somebody, people were being killed in the days of clubs and bows and arrows and rocks
Right.
and any other thing you can use to kill and poison, for God's sakes.
Right.
Well,
So
What's next,
You want to
rocks?
kill someone, you can, and there are any
Well,
number of ways you can
That's
kill
a
another
good
human
point,
being.
because in Chicago, the gangs, what they were doing when Chris, I've been going for 17 years now, but 17 years ago, gangs, because they used to call, naturally if someone was killed by a vehicle, they would call major accident, and we would go out, but an accident is just what it says, it's an accident. If it's unintentionally, then it's a crime. And the gangbangers actually had a term for it. It was called a drive down. They would drive into a group of rival gangs, or they'd see a rival gang member crossing the street, and they would just run them over. So to your point, if you want to kill somebody, you know,
Right.
you're
An
gonna-
automobile is an
Right.
excellent way to kill
And
them.
the thing about laws, in my estimation, laws are for honest people. Criminals, they couldn't give a hoot about
If
laws.
you're going to commit murder, you're not going to care about violating a gun law.
That's right. That's what I'm
It's
saying.
generally
It's for,
believed there are more guns today in the United States than there are people.
and how
Some
can they
say there's
control
400
them?
million guns.
There's
in the
so
United
many around. I think it would be
How is
impossible to
any
control them.
law going to prevent
Well,
a would-be murderer from getting his hands
It's
on
not.
a gun?
Several gun shops that I have been to during and since the Obama administration, they have a sign that says, it's a picture of Obama and a sign, you've probably seen it, that says, our top salesman. Because when they started with the band, they were selling AR-15s like they were going out of style.
Here's another thing that occurred to me.
Because-
They've been rerunning the Ken Burns documentary about Prohibition. We tried outlawing something in 1919. We tried outlawing alcohol. We tried preventing anyone from getting their hands on any form of alcohol.
Right.
The federal government passed it. It had popular support. The press was in favor of it. There was a constitutional amendment.
Right.
They passed the Volstead Act. They had the Treasury Department and Elliott Ness enforcing it. How did that work out?
Right.
How successful was
That's
It
that?
worked out for about 15
Failed
years.
noble experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a little off. But do you ever?
Well, they were trying to regulate alcohol and
Right.
prevent people from getting their hands on alcohol is very similar to trying to prevent people from getting their hands on firearms. They couldn't do it then, and they couldn't do it
It's
today.
it's off the subject. Have you ever see that Budweiser commercial where they got the dog in the wagon and the horses going into the front door of the White House? And when they go in, it's full of beer. When they come out, it's empty. Well, they were the first ones to deliver beer to the White House after Prohibition.
Oh, okay. I've seen they
never saw that
They
one.
show them delivering beer to Al Smith because Al Smith was in favor of
He was
ending
a
prohibition,
wet-
and apparently Anheuser Busch sent a horse-drawn wagon to New York City to personally deliver a case of beer to Al Smith in thanks for all he had done to make prohibition come to an end.
Well, in Oak Park, Saturday, they had a microbrew thing, and I'm walking around, and I look at this microbrewery, the Blind Pig. I said, "Oh, you're from Detroit?" "No." I said, "Well, why do you call it the Blind Pig?" I said, "Somebody mentioned it." I said, "You know what the Blind Pig is? We have what do you call it? What do you call the things where they were selling beer or
Bootlegging or speakeasies.
speakeasy in Chicago. Well, in Detroit, they had Blind Pigs. And Al Capone used to buy whiskey from the mob in Detroit, which was the Purple Gang. And they were all Jews. And he would buy it and cut it and sell it in Chicago.
Well, we're coming up on the end of our
Another minute.
most recent half hour. So we hope you're enjoying this August episode of Meet the Chicago Story. Let's go around the table once again and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves, starting with my right, our long-serving member of our panel.
Am I on your right?
Yes, you are.
And glad I'm not on your
Only
left.
but only
John.
geographically. But only
John.
geographically. No one is to the right of me politically.
Bill Kugelman, former Chicago Fire Department employee.
Tom McKenna, retired Chicago Police Major Accident Investigator.
Don Peter from the Fire Museum of Chicago.
Your announcer, Richard Lang.
And John Escachocco, your host. And we had a call-in today from our regular host and moderator, John, Jack, Red, Ryan. If you're listening, Jack, we hope you're doing well.
Well, now it's time for our final intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians.
Hello, friends. Do you need new tires for your vehicle? How are the brakes? Are they in good condition? How's your front wheel alignment? Do you need your tires rotated? How are the shocks and struts? Do you need an oil and grease change? How about a tune-up? When was the last time you had your engine tuned up? How about the wiper blades? Are they nice, sharp blades to clean off the rain and snow? How are the headlights, tail lights, stop lights, turn directional signals? Are all the bulbs working? How's your cooling system and the exhaust system? How about your battery? Does that need to be upgraded? How about the belts and hoses, fuel injectors, timing belt and chain, and the air conditioning? Is that all working properly? Well, if you need any maintenance work done on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Service, which is located at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. They are on Grand Avenue on the north side of the street, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue. You can't miss the building. There's a big Goodyear sign right on top of the building. Or you can call area code 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, or Ken will be more than happy to assist you and to help you with any questions you might have about the maintenance on your vehicle. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. Saturday, from 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even on Sunday, from 9:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So once again, for any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle, go to Grand Tire and Auto Supply. Once again, their address is at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. And their phone number is area code 773-622-4361. They have great service. Their mechanics are all certified mechanics, and they do quality work. Now, I've been going to Grand Tire with my vehicle since 1985, right up until this present day. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 West Grand Avenue in Chicago. Their phone number is 773-622-4361. Don, Chris, and Ken will be more than happy to help you and to advise you on any maintenance work you might need on your vehicle. So once again, Grand Tire and Auto Service at 7034 Grand Avenue in Chicago, about 2 blocks east of Harlem Avenue on the north side of the street. You can't miss the building because there's a big Goodyear sign on the top of the building.
Now, back to our discussion. John?
Thank you very much, Rich Lang, our announcer. I just want to make a personal note. It's a little bit of a historical note. I mentioned that last Thursday, the 15th of August, was the 250th birthday of Napoleon Bonaparte. It was also the 150th birthday of my great-grandmother.
Wow.
And I just want to mention that before I come here to the show, I visit St. Adalbert Cemetery, and she's buried there. I knew my great-grandmother. She lived to be 93 years old. She died in 1962. She was my father's mother's mother. She was born and raised in Vienna. She told me, I used to come home from grade school. She lived with my grandparents for her last 4 years. She slipped when she was 89. She had been living by herself in Chicago. She slipped on the ice in the winter and fractured her hip. And after that, she was no longer able to maneuver independently.
No easy hip replacements in those.
And that was in that was in 1957 or 58 that happened.
Pretty recent.
So she lived with my grandparents, who lived downstairs from in the same building where I lived. I would come home and I would talk to her. And I remember her telling me when she was a little girl in Vienna, she saw the Emperor Franz Josef ride by on a white horse, leading the army in a parade in the streets of Vienna.
Wow.
And it just fascinates me to think that
Fascinating.
to talk to someone who saw Franz Josef it's just one step away from talking to someone who saw Napoleon. It's
right.
almost that far away.
Was she in Vienna during the war?
No, she was born in 1869. She came to the United States, and I never learned a great deal. She was part Hungarian. I asked her, she said she was part Hungarian. I imagine she was part Austrian. She came to the United States. I think she married in the United States. My great-grandfather, who died around 1920, long before I was born, is buried in Kansas. My family comes from Kansas. So I've seen my great-grandfather's grave. They were the only of my great-grandparents that came to the United States. So I just thought of this, that I know it was her birthday, and on the morning, I went to have a Mass in her, said for her. I went to Mass that morning, and I thought, wait a minute, 1869, that's 150 years. And so that would have been her 150th birthday. Her name was Rose. I asked her what her maiden name was, and she said her name was something like Shemek. Shemek was her maiden name. But she was, of course, she was in her 90s by that point when I was talking to her. But in any event, my great-grandmother Rose would have been 150 years old last Thursday, and I knew her when I was a child. So I just wanted to mention.
And Franz Josef was the Emperor of Hungary. Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. The dual monarchy.
The Emperor of Austria and the Apostolic King of Hungary. On their sabers and swords it said KUK, Kaiser und König, Emperor and King. KUK was inscribed on all the swords and ceremonial sabers that the army officers and naval officers would have. That was from 1867, I think, that they became. That's why we talk about Austria-Hungary in World War I. Prior to that, it had just been the Austrian Empire, but then it became this dual.
To give minorities within an empire.
To give the Hungarians equal status to the Austrians.
John, and I'd like to thank you for sharing that story with us, because it's an excellent example of the people that built this country, made it great. One thing that really unnerves me is when you get politicians that say, "Oh well, we're all immigrants," addressing themselves to the issue of illegal immigration. Totally different from what we're experiencing now. My ancestors from Ireland, they came to this country and built this country. Although they weren't born here, they were very loyal, patriotic Americans, members of the military. These people that are coming here illegally, for a politician to compare them to people like your grandmother is a disgrace.
Well, just the opposite.
Thank you.
I was talking to a lady, and maybe she's 25, and we were talking football, and she said, "Well, when's the last time the Bears were in the Super Bowl?" I said, "I think it was '85." I said, "Yeah," and I said, Hallis, I think he was kind of cheap because they had cheerleaders back then, and he wouldn't pay for them to go to the Super Bowl. he says, well, what are cheerleaders? I said, like the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders? He says, you mean Chicago had them too? I said, yeah, they were called the Honey Bears.
Honey
and she
Bears,
laughed. She said, they called them the Honey Bears?
They used to
I
say,
said, yeah.
They used to say George Hallis threw around dimes as if they were manhole
Covers. Yeah.
I want to. We've got about 20 minutes to go. I wanted to take that little moment to talk about my great grandmothers. I visit her grave all the time. But I wanted to close with the upcoming holiday. I mentioned there's no holidays in August, but right after the end of August we have Labor Day, the first Monday in September. And for many of us, for many years, the most notable thing about Labor Day was the Jerry Lewis telethon. And that was the only thing that I really remember, was watching Jerry Lewis with a show that would come on the night before, would come on the Sunday night, and would run all through the night and all through the following morning and the following afternoon. And it would finally go off around 5 or 6 or 7, depending on whether there had been a ball game on WGN that delayed the finale.
In the center, they preempted it, yeah.
Right. And then it would end with him singing, "You'll Never Walk Alone." You'll never walk alone. I'm not. I like Jerry Lewis. I don't want anybody thinking I'm mocking him, because he was a great guy. He raised millions and millions of dollars for muscular dystrophy, which was the purpose of his telethon. And then he would lay the microphone down on the stool and walk away, and there'd be confetti coming. It was a great show to watch. Ed McMahon was his announcer. Great. And it was a great show. So that's all I wanted to say about Labor Day. And anybody else want to chime in and say anything?
You know what?
About
and about Jerry Lewis's the telethon, when I was still on the job, towards the end of my membership, we were told that we would never. We weren't going to go out and fill the boot and have anything to do anymore with the telethon, Jerry Lewis telethon. Yeah. And I was president of the union at the time, and I said, whose idea was this? Is there something wrong? And our people would be out on the street collecting all of this money. We'd have the telethon. We had people down in the Channel 9, and it was a big deal.
Right.
And not only for us, for Chicago, but for the whole fire department membership all over the country. This was not just Chicago or Illinois. This was the whole United States. And one of the people that I grew up with, his name was Bob Sampson. Bob was yes.
Right. The airline man.
Bob was head MD, and was always in a wheelchair. Had a car. Was married, and they had several kids, a couple of kids.
Right.
And I grew up with Bob, and his brother Jim was also on the job. But Bob put himself through law school, and was a state's attorney for a while, and worked for the city, and knew a lot of politicians, of course. And I called Bob, and I said, "What's going on, kid?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "This is a complete surprise that they stopped us from doing this." Right. And other cities, New York, LA, and so forth, they were doing it. Well,
they were always a fixture on the TV show. The fire union always coming out giving a check for $1 million or $2 million or whatever it was.
Being a private detective, I had a snitch, and I found out whose idea it was, and it was I don't remember her name now. She was city clerk or whatever the hell she was, and she was the one that stopped it. We also were stopped from collecting in our helmets for Misericordia. Ooh. And there was another one too. I can't think of what the other one was. I called sister at Misericordia, quite a gal, And I said, "Sister, what's going on? She said, "I know." Well, she was, excuse me, I hate to use the word, she was a ballsy lady. Nobody messed with her. She's still there.
Yeah, she's still there.
Yep, she's still there.
Think of her name.
Yeah, I can't think of it right now. But anyway, I thought, oh, this is the one. She'll put a stop to this. You know, she knows everybody, and nobody messes around with her. She said, "Well, Bill, we've had a lot of luck in that, and it was a typical religious type, you know, saying that she did." She said, "Well," she said, "we've had a good run of it," and she says, "You know, God bless them. We'll say a prayer for all of them and that, and nothing about, hey, I'm going to make a couple of phone calls and you know, nothing like that." So that was the end of that. And but I did go to Sampson, and Bob died shortly after that.
Right.
And I also went to my cousin's husband, who was vice president of the United, and Dan at that time said, "Bill, I have no idea." He says, "You know, that's out." He says, "What did Bob Sampson say?" And he's
Right.
very upset,
Right.
very upset about
He
it.
was a big Fire fan, wasn't he?
Yes, he was a big Fire fan.
He was involved with the airline, wasn't he?
Yes,
He
he
was
was
a
right.
CEO of them.
He worked for my cousin's husband, Dan Meenan.
Sister Rosemary Connolly.
Rosemary, Sister Rosemary, and my cousin Dan was vice president of properties, and Bob Sampson worked for him as his attorney. I mean, they were both attorneys, but that's what he did with United, and United was very good to him because they would take him. He'd fly to Hawaii and spend time there and come back,
Right.
and it was, he was like their right hand man.
I would always refer to him as the airline man. I didn't
Right,
remember his
yeah.
name, but I always called him the airline man.
Yeah, no, it's Bob Sampson,
I was-
and he it finally ended up that it was called off. Now, whether it was Bob Sampson, whoever it was, popular opinion, I think it was, turned it off,
Right.
and we still do it now today.
Right.
They finally did it, and
There's no
this.
telethon anymore. There's
No, and that's a shame because it was something you always,
Yeah.
you
was
you
something to do
wanted
on
to
Labor
see.
Day.
Yeah. Bob was one of the guys on there, and he would come and.
Very eloquent. He was a
Right.
Oh yeah, what a great guy.
Bill,
What a great guy.
I understand.
He excuse me, John. He when we were growing up, engine 102, 1723 West Greenleaf and Clark. They're out of there now in the new house, but that's where he grew up. And the guys would he'd come there, and he decided to go to college, get a law degree, and my dad was driving the truck there, truck 25, and he would take Bob, grab him if they get a run, grab him out of the wheelchair, throw him up in the front seat, and take him along. And he was just he was all fire department,
Right.
and he's just was a good guy. He's just a real good guy. It's
We
a
were
shame that
talking-
they lost him, but the whole thing stopped. Now I don't think they're doing it for Misericordia anymore. I think that's
The only
So,
thing that I know of at Misericordia, one of the gentlemen comes and they sell soda at the muster out in the parking lot.
okay.
And from what I understand, the proceeds from that go to Misericordia.
Oh,
I might be wrong, but I think that's how it works.
that's not enough. I still do things for there. My dad
Well,
was on truck 40. He was lieutenant of truck 47, and Sister Rosemary was just starting at Misericordia, and my dad used to take the truck over to Misericordia. It was in their district, and give the kids a ride, and let them crawl all over the rig, and she thought that was great. She's quite a gal.
Bill, I understand that the reason why they stopped the firemen going out in the street with the boot to collect money is because they were afraid that a fireman or somebody would get hit by a car.
Well, John, that did happen.
Mm-hmm.
That did happen.
Yeah,
There was, some incidents
yeah,
that happened.
I know.
Right.
And of course, right away they got to shut down something
Yeah,
like
right.
that. But you know what? They didn't shut it down for long.
Now this not this weekend that just passed, but a week or two ago, as I was going up Route 12 up to Elkhorn, all down Rand Road, U.S. Route 12, the firemen from Wakanda, Arlington Heights, Prospect Heights, Fox Lake, and all the firemen were staying out in the intersections with their boot. God, it was an expensive weekend for me because I put $1 in every boot as I was going down the road. But and in Misericordia, we had a member of the 511 Club that was very deeply involved with them over, though he became a bad boy, and right now he's looking at bars when they don't serve drinks. But anyways, I have my heart out for those organizations like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially and like you said, that the person that was involved with the telethon from United. United used to rent out their room where they used to add on the breaks. In other words, they would go to Jerry Lou's for so many times, and they would go to different cities to collect money, and they would televise from the United their room up there, United headquarters, because WGN would be there, and I was with WGN and helped set up the broadcast equipment for that.
They were out at I think it's Des Plaines.
Yes.
Ridge, and that's what Bob.
Either Des
that
Plaines
was one
or
of his deals that he bought.
Either Des Plaines or Mount Prospect, right off of Algonquin Road.
Right on Algonquin.
Yep.
That's when they started moving stuff from Denver to Chicago.
Yeah.
Right.
But that was a great organization, John. I'm very happy that you brought that up because that really brings back the memories. And Jerry Lewis was just, oh God, he used to perform, and he used to have. I can't think that the little guy that always was on with him, Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh, Sammy Davis.
That, oh my God,
yeah.
I tell you, he was a riot and a half. And
He wasn't quite politically correct, but he was around.
Sinatra would come on
yes,
from time to
yeah,
time,
and all
had
the
some
great
big stars.
and all
Jerry
those.
Lewis is still living, isn't he?
What
No, he passed away a couple of years ago.
Didn't
A couple of years ago.
Dean Martin show up one day? It was the
One
first
time.
time they
I think it was the only time they ever appeared together on stage after they broke up. Frank Sinatra brought him out.
right.
I was watching when that happened, and Lewis was kind of uncomfortable. You could see he was a little bit uncomfortable because they still hadn't.
As it went along, he seemed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sinatra
But they
brought,
never-
he said, I got somebody out here that you haven't seen in a long time, Jerry, and he brought Dean Martin.
They never appeared together.
No,
after
I don't think they never got together and did any
Right.
shows or anything like that.
But there was a story out there of some problem involving maybe Jerry Lewis personally, why he was eased out of the telethon, not just for health
I
reasons.
never understood.
I know, nothing substantial.
I know. I was shocked when they removed him, and then they changed the telethon, and then they had a telethon for a year or two, and then it ended. Then they
Well, they
discontinued
tried
the
to bring a
telethon.
host back for a while.
You know something. You know something, gentlemen. Anytime you have like Jerry Lewis. Now remember Bert Parks with Miss America. He was eased out because somebody gets brain damage and has
We need a new face.
They got Donald Trump.
They had Bert Parks
Miss America.
and Miss America and Jerry Lewis with the telethon. I mean, and there was a couple other gentlemen that did stuff, and they eased them out because some idiot gets a brain damage, and oh, this guy didn't say thank you very much, Mr. So and so, so now he's out of the picture.
That's right. That's right.
But
I never understood. There was never any real explanation why Jerry Lewis at the time.
right.
Now he was he was getting up in age and his health was declining. You know, there was one year when he looked terrible up there, but then he looked better the following year. He had a different treatment and he looked much better the following
You
year.
wanted to see what he looked like from year to year.
Yeah.
But I remember Bert Parks. There she goes, Miss America, and
He was the Miss America pick.
and there, who was another? There was there were a couple of them that did telethons or did shows like that.
What's his name? They used to Johnny Carson's.
But
The
Johnny-
Oscar,
Johnny's
the Oscar,
Academy
yeah.
Awards.
Yeah.
Bob Hope. was
That's
always-
yeah.
Bob Hope, and then after Hope it was Johnny Carson who do it every year.
But
Was Hope eased out for any reason?
No, I don't.
wonder.
I don't
Yeah.
think so. I don't think so. There wasn't any controversy at the
Nothing
time
that came out.
that I can remember. He had done it for so many years.
Several years.
you get some of these people with brain damage, and if the things don't go their way, well then you're out.
Well, I haven't watched the Oscar telecast.
Sounds
for a
familiar.
while. It's,
They equate change with doing something good.
yeah.
The Oscars, I haven't watched them in years.
But I always
Becomes
thought
political.
change for
It's the only
the
industry
sense of change is no.
that has a big celebration,
It backfires.
telling everyone how wonderful they are. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I see Oscars every day because he lives right upstairs from me.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
And that Oscar is no wiener.
Whoa! Okay.
Tom, you wanted to say something about the decline of unions and how unions were once associated with Labor Day, of course, and
Well, we've got a short period of time, so we can't
yeah, you can't really.
really delve into it that deeply. But it's unions are, I mean, they're just. Chicago was probably one of the biggest union towns in the United
Right.
States, and now statistics I'm hearing, even in Chicago, there's only about 30%. I
Right.
think,
That's the way it
I
is
think
all over the
union
country, I
membership.
guess.
Nationwide, I think
Nationwide,
it's
it's
18.
much smaller
Yeah,
than
it's 18%, I believe, and
I
in
think they're-
some areas it's non-existent. When the state of Ohio, Ohio and Pennsylvania voted to make it a right-to-work state, I said that's it. They're through, and there's no stronger union supporter than I am. I mean, I've been a member of three unions.
I think the only unions that are really strong today are the government employed,
And
Right.
maybe
teachers and
the auto
government
in
employees
the,
unions.
in the old days, if you threw up the union picket, nobody would cross it. I mean, it was unthinkable.
I like to see in the paper, I think today too, there was a picture of the rats.
Oh yeah, they've got the giant.
I
rat.
love it. I love it.
They've got the giant blow up rat.
Yeah.
If you've seen it at Pickett
How
Center.
far
I
back
wish-
does the teachers?
I wish in
go? I don't think
1980
that's
that we would have had that.
There's two. There's the IFT, the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, which I think is old. I think that goes
Really?
back, I think, to the 40s. I'm going to guess that goes back to the 40s.
But they would never have thought of striking.
They were never as, but then you have the National Education Association, which I think came in more in the late 50s, 60s. I'm just sort of speculating on these times.
Yeah.
The NEA became very big, and the NEA was much more politically inclined, much more involved with left-wing politics and so on. At least that's the way it was at one time. I don't know if that still holds true today.
But like you said, non-government employee unions. I don't.
Used to think of unions as steel workers, and
Right.
auto workers, coal
Electricians.
miners.
Yeah.
It's partially their own fault because all the new jobs, in the IT industry and the different
Right.
businesses, they just didn't recruit, and I guess it really wasn't necessary because, I tell people that are non-pro union, every single benefit that you have on your job now, whether you're union member, non-union member, like them or don't like
Right.
them, you got that because of the union.
Right.
Everything. The 40-hour week, the days off, the benefits,
That's right.
every single thing you got because of the union.
And should a non-union member enjoy all of those rights that the union fought for? That's a big issue, you think, even
Well,
now.
didn't they have a big thing? If
The
you're
Trump
not
for that.
if you're not union, why should we have to pay for the dues? And I think the Supreme
If you
Court
get the benefits
kicked it
without
out.
the union.
I mean, they don't have to. I think.
One thing I remember as a kid was that in the 50s and 60s, everyone in the country knew who George Meany was.
Right.
George Meany was the head of the AFL-CIO.
That's right.
Today, you could stop 100 people downtown in a union, supposedly union city, And I doubt if 1 in 100 could tell you who the current head of the AFL. I have no idea. I think his name is Creamster, but I'm not sure.
Last week, Margaret Blackshear died, and she was the head of the unions. I can't think of what
People today,
their
I think,
name
wouldn't
was.
even know what the AFL-CIO
Margaret
is.
Blackshear was another ballsy woman
remember the name.
who didn't take, a bad word from anybody. She was a fighter, and there just aren't those people around anymore. Now the cab drivers, they do have a union, and they were strong at one time. Now you've got the, what do they call it, the Uber and the Lyft,
Right.
and those, as far as I'm concerned, those drivers are all scabs.
Well,
None of them belong to the union.
in
I was
all
talking to
the
Niles.
established cab companies, they're leasing out the permits. So the guy has their own car and they put yellow cab on it. But if you look at the doors, it says owned by so and so.
Yeah.
The organized unions get in trouble partly because they raise their costs too much. They raise their dues. Maybe that was seen as a impediment to a lot of members.
They raise their dues
My
because
my mother worked for Stuart Warner
Right.
on Diversey,
No.
and they started to unionize. They started talking about it. My mother was all for it. She became a steward. Well, they laid into her, you wouldn't believe. And I didn't know about this at the time, of course, but it was later on. And I mean, they called her a dyke and accused her of all kinds of stuff. And she stood by, and they got unionized.
I tell young guys in the police department now what the conditions were like before we were unionized, before we had a representation. They think I'm making it up.
Well,
They said they
Tom,
couldn't do that.
we
Not
got
only
guys
could
in
they
the
do it, they did it.
we got guys in the fire
Right.
department that don't know what we got,
Right.
and it was for us standing up
Yeah.
that this whole state got collective bargaining with the police.
Right.
Well,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen, we'll perhaps continue that in September. We can talk a little bit more about Labor Day. It is a September holiday, but this kind of brings to a close our August edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. We're glad you've listened to us. I'll turn the microphone over to our announcer, Rich Lang.
Just a few final announcements. Recordings of previous Meet the Chicago Historians programs are available for your listening pleasure via the internet at www.windycityhometown.com. We want to give a special thank you to our executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, John Seconda. On behalf of everyone associated with our Historians program, we thank you for listening. Best wishes, and see you and hear you next month. This is your announcer, Rich Lang.
Have a great Labor Day.
Hear, hear.
You have been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the John DeVito Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, August the 19th, the year 2019. This broadcast was produced and directed by John DeVito, and our special thanks to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. On behalf of the entire staff of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, I wish each and every one of our great members a very safe and enjoyable Labor Day weekend. Until next time, be safe and thanks for listening.